into the bullpen and gone. Deja vu for Shohei. From Saturday into Sunday, number 39 gives the Dodgers a 1-0 lead. The 2-2 pitch. Ground ball to short. The flip to second for one. That's two, and that's a win for LA.
The truth is, I think it's better for this organization to realize that what they are doing is not working. And if they go on some, in my opinion, fluky run down the stretch, it will mean that they learn all of the wrong lessons for this season once again. The problem for this team is that the entire roster construction is broken. Something is clearly going awry, and they need to learn from this. They need to take a hard look at their decision-making processes. They need to take a hard look at their roster construction. They need to take a hard look at who is our core? What are we really building around right now? There are hard questions that need to be asked about this team, and I don't think that they will be asked through the right prism if they go on a run to the playoffs. So, no, I'm done rooting for this team to go on a run.
Hold on a minute, T-Bone. Hold on a minute. Mr. Conductor himself,
I know.
The leader of the engine, the conductor of the Cardinals caravan, is just doing this right here. Just throwing it away. For a team that just lost a top team in the NL West, the Dodgers lost 2 of 3, looked good in the third one, just couldn't get their offense going. BK's just going to toss that conductor hat to the side and say, no, I'm done rooting for this team. I want them to tank the rest of the way. Unbelievable. And yes, I did just put words in BK's mouth. Welcome, everyone, into BK and Ferrario. Grant Francis, Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Alex Ferrario. I'm finally out of isolation in my basement, that box in my basement. I'm back with Adult Interaction. Happy to be back with you today here on BK and Ferrario. And we're starting there from what I heard BK mention earlier today on the opening drive, filling in for Randy Carricker, because Cardinals lose 2 of 3 to the LA Dodgers, sets themselves back further in the race for a postseason spot. They're 11 games behind the Milwaukee Brewers. I think we can just kiss that hope goodbye after this next 3 coming against Milwaukee. But they sit 5 games out of a wild card spot with the San Francisco Giants, the New York Mets, both sitting ahead of them and within 1 and 2 games of that final wild card spot. And I got to be honest, I didn't expect BK to say that when I heard him driving in this morning, that it makes more sense for this team to miss the playoffs than go on a run down the stretch, because that's something that I've thought the last couple of years. As much as I want winning baseball for the Cardinals, T-Bone, it's always sat in the back of my head that the Cardinals' mindset is get into the playoffs and see if anything can happen. And in their minds, the front office, ownership group's minds, if they're a playoff team, doesn't matter if they're the Central Division crown, the best team in the National League, or a team that gets in from 1 game in the wild card. If they get in, they're high-fiving each other because that is a successful season in their eyes. And I don't think that's good for this Cardinals team, for fans that want to see progress. I said this about Mizzou football for the longest time before last season. I'm sick of seeing the same thing over and over, where you get 7 wins, you get 8 wins, and there's no progress. You want progress. And for the Cardinals, there has not been progress. You could argue since 2019, although that team was really a false team in my eyes. You haven't really seen progress in almost 10 years with this squad, where it felt like, hey, there's a ceiling to approach. And so I think there's a lot of Cardinals fans out there today listening, saying the same thing. Don't make the playoffs, miss the playoffs. So you'll learn your lesson, you'll make changes into the organization, and you'll fix your wrongs of the past and start getting into more of a consistent contention role. But my question, T-Bone, and I'm sure it's your question as well, is, do we really buy that the Cardinals are going to learn their lesson? Because let me take you back to 2016. This was the year after they had won 100 games. 86 wins. They were 17 and a half games out of the top spot in the NL Central. Missed the playoffs. The next year, 83 wins. Missed the playoff. The next year, you built a little, 88 wins, missed the playoff. Then you made the playoffs for 4 consecutive years. But then last season took place. And last season, everybody said was an anomaly. Injuries happen. We need to fix our pitching, and look what can happen from there. And now we're back in the same spot, to where you went out there, you invested money in the pitching side of things, and we might be talking about 75 wins this season. I don't know if this Cardinals team will ever learn their lesson in terms of how to approach this organization, because when you're drafting top 10, that should be the eye-opening moment that says, hey, maybe we need to change the way we do things. And they didn't change anything this offseason.
Yeah, a little to their credit, though, they did change a little bit in terms of how they look at their pitching philosophy.
They fixed their pitching. I'll agree with that.
They said, okay, we do need more swing and miss, which was finally.
Yeah.
They finally did it. But, again, I say that while also acknowledging, it was also the bare minimum to improve, especially the starting staff. The bullpen they did a great job with. I'm kind of with you. I do think it probably is better for them not to go on a falsified run here to where it is, oh, well, look, see, this team always had it in them. No, this team has proven that they're just a 500 team. I said this when they started to play well after Mother's Day. We came on the show, we said, hey, do you think that the Cardinals back? And I said, maybe, but I can't forget about what happened in the first part of the season prior to Mother's Day. The reason that team played like that is because they're capable of playing like that, and they've reverted back to that post-All-Star break. It's why you're seeing them just free-falling right now. I think it is probably best for them to miss the playoffs, so they have to look back at themselves again and go, okay, what went wrong here? What do we need to do as an organization? Problem is do I actually believe that they're going to learn, quote-unquote, learn any lessons from this? Call me skeptical, because they've missed the playoffs, if they do this year, 5 of the last 9 years.
Yeah.
And how much philosophical changes have we really seen from the St. Louis Cardinals? Not a lot. I mean, this was the first year they finally admitted, okay, we probably need swing and miss stuff for a rotation.
Yep.
We need swing and miss stuff in our bullpen. It's the first time. The first time. And we've been clamoring for it since, 2021, I would say?
Yeah, maybe.
Yes, it probably is beneficial for them to miss the playoffs, so they do have to have some of these conversations that we're having today of, okay, how did we get here? What do we need to do moving forward? How do we develop guys internally, both on the pitching side with the guys that they've got in Springfield that look like they could be guys that could help the big league club, like Quinn Matthews, Tink Hintz, TK Roby, who's on a rehab assignment, Ian Bedell, who's had some good outings down in the minor leagues as well, Michael McGreevy. How do we develop those guys? What do we do for our bullpen long term? How we want to build it? I think they figured that out this offseason. How do we find a way to get to maximize what Jordan Walker is and have him develop? Same with Nolan Gorman or Lars Newport or Brendan Donovan, all these young hitters that you have. They have to ask those questions, but I hate to say this, but until I think John Mozeliak has left the St. Louis Cardinals, I'm not sure how much actual change you're going to see, because he's been the guy that's overseen these missed playoffs 5 of the last 9 years, and we're still not seeing significant enough changes to where you say, okay, they're finally starting to make those philosophical changes. They're finally starting to look themselves in the mirror and say, here's what we're doing wrong. Here's what we need to do to fix it.
I want to isolate the offense here for a minute. We'll get to pitching momentarily, but I want to isolate the offense because I think that's the bigger issue right now. Once again, where we saw a couple of games where just the offense just goes completely stagnant for you, and it's the main reason why this team is sitting out of a postseason spot. They've had a 508 total runs scored this season. There are only one other team in the National League that has scored less runs than the Cardinals this year, and that is the Miami Marlins. The Colorado Rockies have scored more runs than the Cardinals have this season, and I think offense is the biggest problem for a lot of Cardinals fans. What you said, T-Bone, is why missing the playoffs, I don't know, makes a difference to me. Because the Cardinals have yet to show me that they're willing to invest in players and let them develop. Now, I know people can argue, well, look at what they're doing with Mason Wynn right now. Absolutely. But I also feel like that they don't have any other option at shortstop to work with right now. I look at the guy like Jordan Walker, and I understand that some view Jordan Walker as, hey, he's still got issues right now. We can't rely on this guy to help compete. But you're stuck in this murky middle of thinking you can compete because you have guys like Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado and Wilson Contreras that say, well, these guys are going to carry our offense and help develop these other players. But then when they don't hit, you're unwilling to let those players go through the ups and downs of their struggles to develop, i.e. Jordan Walker. Even a guy like Nolan Gorman, who has looked bad for a long stretch, and then he comes into only certain areas of opportunity. When you go back to years past, I mean, we saw this with Dylan Carlson. We saw this with certain guys that were traded away because they didn't have the opportunities here. I'm very concerned for the offensive development of this team because, sure, this team has success at finding complementary pieces and guys that help you win in the postseason. But the problem is this team has yet to develop a player that can get you to the postseason. And if they're not willing to spend money on those players via free agency, if you're not willing to spend assets via trade, and if you're not willing to give them the playing time that gets them through the ups and downs of a regular season and growth because you want to compete, well, then how do I trust you missing the playoffs tells me that next year it's going to be, we are going to lean into these younger players so that they can figure it out. Next year would feel like the same thing because the Cardinals would view the NL as, well, we just got to get into the playoffs, and that's a win in our books.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily mind the idea of, okay, just get into the playoffs and see what happens. And I know people don't like to hear that.
But you got to have a roster that you could believe win, if that's the case.
That's the thing, is you have to build a roster that can both get you to October and get you through October.
Yeah.
And right now, they don't have a roster that can potentially get them to October. But even if they did, it would feel a lot like the 2021 Cardinals, where you look at them and you go, okay, they're there. Are they really going to get through? The answer is probably not, because you can look at their roster and say they probably don't have the pitching to get themselves through October. They really don't have the offense that you can rely on, because we've been talking about it from the start of the season, and it's August 19th, by the way, and we're still talking about the offense's lack of power, its inability to hit with runners in scoring position. So I don't necessarily mind this idea of, okay, we don't necessarily need to win the NL Central. We just got to get to October. Okay, that's fine, but you have to build a roster that can get you there and also get you through October. And they continuously seem to be building a roster that they think can get them there. And then we can all look at and say, not really. They're not going to get themselves through October if they do arrive.
But it's still refusal to develop the players that they need to develop for the long term. It's always the temporary fixes of, hey, Jordan Walker's not going to be able to get us there right now, so let's have a Tommy Pham who can do it for us. Or let's bring up this person to put in that spot. And it's not the, hey, we're going to need Jordan Walker for the long run, and right now he's not good enough to help us win right now.
Yeah, I don't necessarily mind that, because I think there's a fine balance, and we'll talk about this in a little bit later on in the show. There's a fine balance between trying to develop them while also winning. I don't necessarily mind this idea of, okay, bring in a Tommy Pham to take over a role. Or here, this is a better example. Go to 2022. They kind of go through spring training and they say, okay, let's see what the young guys have for this DH role. So they kind of give Juan Yepes a little bit of a look. I don't remember who the other bat was. It might have been like maybe Gorman, if I remember. And they say, oh, young guys are not ready. Let's go out and sign veterans and Corey Dickerson and Albert Pujols, and let's platoon that spot. Okay, that makes sense. You don't think they're ready. So go out there, fill that need, and then in a year or two, in theory, you're able to bring up these young guys that you hope take on that role. But the problem for them is they kind of get stuck in this, okay, we're going to have it to the young guys, and then when the young guys don't actually work out, they panic, and now the roster's not set up to withstand when those guys don't end up meeting that production.
Yeah, well, it seems like they're stuck right now, and it's not just for this season. It's stuck in their long-term plans. And as T-Ball mentioned, we're going to discuss that. We're also going to get into Dylan Carlson, who's having success elsewhere, who I think also ties into all of this. So plenty of Cardinals discussion, including Katie Wu, who will join us at 1 o'clock later on today here on BK and Ferrario. Our Air Comfort Service text line is 314-399-9646. Also live up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Our cameras brought to you by the Air Alliance team. And of course, as always, you can send us mic drops over on our 101 ESPN app. With Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, last night I was very sad.
Why?
And it's not because I had to come back in here.
Oh, I thought maybe that was it.
Although I do miss my little girls right now.
Do you miss BK?
I do miss BK. Although we walked in and then it's like that gut feeling. It's like, oh, God, no, I didn't miss you. No. I was a little sad because Mike Greer pissed me off last night, the general manager of the San Jose Sharks. But you know what? I'm not going to have all negativity because it's a Blues topic. I'm going to sell you on why you shouldn't be disappointed about this Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway situation. I think they're still going to be members of the Blues. I'll tell you why next on 101 ESPN. So I won't lie to you guys. Last night at about 11 o'clock, I had one of those anxiety attacks. Got very sad. If you kept track over the weekend, the Edmonton Oilers were active.
Yeah, poor guys. They had to leave vacation and everything.
Stan Bowman just came off of his island in Margaritaville and was like, son of a, now I got to make trades. So
that Army mother.
All right.
I'm on vacation.
So the Oilers last night made their first trade with the Vancouver Canucks. They traded for Vasily Podkolzin. They gave up a fourth-round draft pick in this year's upcoming draft that they originally got from Ottawa. This is a 23-year-old forward who kind of fell out of grace in Vancouver, had top six upside, never really got the playing time under Rick Tocchet. That trade happened. First thing I thought of was, okay, Dylan Holloway. See you later, because this kid makes $1 million, cheaper than what Dylan Holloway is. Got a little NHL experience. You move on from that player. And then the real heartbreaking news took place for a lot of Blues fans, I would imagine. Last night, Edmonton made a trade with the San Jose Sharks. They traded Cody Ceci and their third-round draft pick in this year's draft for a defenseman named Ty Emberson. And the first thought I had at that was, son of a, now they're not getting Philip Broberg because they eliminated $3 million in cap space. They can now be cap compliant to match not only Philip Broberg, but if they wanted to, match Dylan Holloway as well with the LTIR situation of Evander Kane. So my thought was, Blues aren't getting any of these guys. And that's how I was going to open this segment today. And then God bless Jason Gregor. For those that don't know, Jason Gregor, who hosts a show up in Edmonton, also on the Daily Faceoff with Frank Saravalli. This is what he tweeted out a little bit ago. I'm still not sold that Cody Ceci trade guarantees Edmonton matches the Broberg offer. Wouldn't be shocked if Edmonton doesn't match either Broberg or Holloway. So now I'm going to insert some optimism in your live, T-Bone.
Right. I like that.
I know a lot of people probably see this and say, well, okay, well, they traded Cody Ceci. Of course, they're going to match a Philip Broberg. He's got top four potential, as Daniel Nugent-Bowman told us last week. I'm kind of in the line of Jason Gregor, and I don't know if they match both of these guys. And here's why. Yes, they need cap space, not just for this year, but beyond this season. And the Edmonton Oilers arguably had a really good offseason. They acquired a couple of top six forwards that can play. They acquire a young defenseman. This Ty Emberson, according to a lot of San Jose Sharks lists, was a top 3 prospect for them prior to last season when he got NHL experience. So you bring in a right-handed defenseman who's 24 years old, who's making $1 million and is a restricted free agent beyond this season, has a little of NHL experience, and from all the analytical site looks at this and says this is a top 4 potential who plays defense, i.e. what they need in their top 4, also better than Cody Ceci. And then they brought in Podkolzin, and they've already got Victor Arvidsson, Jeff Skinner. They got a lot of forwards. Dylan Holloway was a 4th liner. And now you bring in a 23-year-old forward who's making $1 million this year and next year and plays into your bottom 6 role with the potential upside of being a top 6 player. I think what Edmonton might do in this scenario is say, here's the deal. We've just replaced the 2 guys that we would get criticism for of letting walk. Yes, those guys were former first overall draft picks, both top 15 picks. But we're replacing those guys with draft pick compensation, and we've already brought in 2 younger players that play similar positions for us in the same role that are under contract for next year, and we've saved ourselves $3 million beyond this year. I might be totally off with this. It might be total Blues optimism that what the Blues are going to do is not get either of these players, and Edmonton's be like, we just saved cap space, we're matching these players. But don't overlook the fact that they brought in a 24 and a 23-year-old player who play the same positions that both Broberg and Holloway play, and those 2 players are costing them $2 million versus Broberg and Holloway costing them $7 million, not just this season, but next season. And that cap space is just as important for them next year as it is this year. And don't forget, if they match the offer on both Holloway and Broberg, those players cannot be traded until August 13th of 2025. And if you check your calendars, that's 2 months into the offseason of the NHL. even with these moves, I still wonder if Edmonton doesn't match either of these players and sticks with the cost-controlled acquisitions that they made last night.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think with the forward, it certainly makes me think that they're really trying to get that replacement for Holloway. That's what that move felt like to me. But when I see them ship out the salary that they did with Cody Ceci and his $3.25 million, it almost makes me wonder if, okay, maybe they are trying to free up that space so they can also keep Broberg on top of this defenseman that they acquired. Because we talk about defensemen in the NHL, they're just as valuable as having good pitching in baseball. You know, you need a lot of those guys under contract because injuries happen, and like you just want to throw a bunch of them at the wall and see which ones stick. And with Broberg, a guy that has top 4 potential, as you mentioned, Daniel Nugent-Bowman told us, I just don't think you let that guy just walk out the door for a second-round pick. You know, I understand he doesn't want to be there, and that does factor into this. I mean, he did sign this offer sheet for a reason. He does love toasted Ravs and a free zoo, but it's also that he doesn't like the Edmonton Oilers.
And doesn't want to play on his offhand, which I think is very important.
So I find it interesting of maybe that plays into this, and that's why this acquisition where they send out CC, they get this defenseman in return. Maybe that is a sign of, okay, we just found the guy that we need to replace Broberg if we will let him walk. If I'm in the Oilers' shoes, though, I'm matching the Broberg offer sheet. I'm going to figure out my cap situation this year and next year when we get there, and I'm going to let Holloway walk. I wonder if that's what they do. I think if I had to guess, like right now, and we kind of think the decision's probably going to be made later on this afternoon.
Yeah, Mark Spector has said that they're expecting some type of announcement today. They don't have to make an announcement until 9:30 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow. So that's 8:30 our time in the morning.
If I had to make your prediction right now, I think the Blues end up with Holloway and they do not end up with Broberg.
Yeah, my gut, I'm going to stick with it. My gut tells me they're not going to match either of these guys. I think this cap space is so crucial to this team, and I understand a lot of people's view is then why trade Cody Ceci? Because you've gotten rid of then 2 defensemen for 1 defenseman, and that defense does not improve. Yes, but I also think it's important to look at who they acquired. Like this Ty Emberson, he's only played 30 games in the NHL. But he played with a terrible San Jose Sharks team last year. He averaged almost 19 minutes and was not a bad defenseman for them. And this is $950,000 that they're making for a 24-year-old who would play arguably in their top 4, maybe top 6 next season. Guys, Philip Broberg, yes, he's got top 4 potential, and he showed up in the postseason last year. But also remember that this was a guy that they were trying to trade in December last season. He plays on the left side. He wants to play on the left side. They've got no room on their left side, and he's making $4.6 million for this year and next year. And as much as the Edmonton Oilers don't want to walk away from an 8th overall draft pick, I also have to look at the landscape of my roster and say, okay, well, Matthias Ekholm's not going anywhere in my top 4 who plays the left side. Evan Bouchard is on my right side. I've got Darnell Nurse, and nobody's taking on $9.5 million without me eating some of that salary space. Do I want Philip Broberg, who's only played 80 games in the NHL, mind you, who I still don't know what that potential is? Yes, he's played more, but he's on the offhand, probably not the most reliable player in my top 4. Or do I go for a guy who's making $950,000, who has played in the top 4 for San Jose, plays his natural right side, and if that doesn't work for us, well, then that's an easy split. It's not an easy split for Philip Broberg, who's making $4.6 million if he doesn't pan out to be what they need him to be, and you have to keep him until the end of August when all of the rosters are typically set, and you think you're going to get better than a second-round draft pick for that guy if he doesn't live up to expectations? I'm just not so sure Edmonton, if it's the smartest move to match the offer of Philip Broberg.
Well, and here's another thing, too, that it hasn't really been brought up much. The things that have been brought up are being cap compliant at the beginning of the season, which the Oilers could do signing both of these players because of Kane going on long-term IR.
Absolutely.
But when Kane comes back, that changes things for them. And also something that we haven't really talked about, Leon Draisaitl is an unrestricted free agent after this upcoming season. So
he's making $8.5 million
exactly.
now.
So that's going to be, 13 at the least?
$5 to $6 million more, yeah.
For sure. So, even further down the road, $4 million for Broberg is not nothing. They could really use that cap space, especially when they need to re-sign one of their big players in Draisaitl.
And don't overlook that Evan Bouchard gets it as well. He's 3.9 right now, and he's an RFA after this season.
This isn't just about Kane, Broberg, and Holloway. This is about players that they have to re-sign long-term very quickly coming up in the upcoming offseason.
And I've seen a couple of texts on Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646 saying, Alex, this sounds all great, but if you're the Edmonton Oilers, you worry about that problem next year. You don't worry about it now when you're trying to win a cup. I agree with that, which is why I could be totally off, and by 12 o'clock this afternoon, Edmonton could just come out and say, nope, we're matching both offers. We'll figure this out later on down the road. That seems to be the general gravitation for Blues fans is like, oh, well, you're not getting any of them now that they've cleared the cap space. Yes, they cleared cap space, but they also traded away 2 draft picks in the top 4 rounds for this upcoming year. So they don't have a draft pick until the 5th round. If they match these offers on top of the players that they just brought in, sure, they'll be cap compliant. But what happens if you're a team that wants to try and add at the trade deadline?
You're screwed.
You got no cap space unless you're putting somebody else on the LTIR, which my guess is Evander Kane's coming back on that one. Now go down the path of we've just acquired 2 younger players that fill the same void that those 2 guys were doing because Dylan Holloway's not playing in your top 6. Philip Broberg's probably playing in your top 4, but again, on his offhand. Now we've acquired 2 younger players that fit the same roles for $4 million cheaper. And we've added a 2nd and 3rd round draft pick that we didn't have for this year's draft if we want to add at the deadline.
Yeah, and that's the thing, too, is the deadline. Because you mentioned, well, now you got to kind of wiggle around. How do you get back to being cap compliant if or when Kane comes back off of LTIR in season and you're right there? Well, also, how are you going to upgrade a team if you don't have, A, cap space, but B, draft picks? That's one of the things that you see fly around a lot. Now, you could send out some prospects, but again, you still got to be cap compliant at the trade deadline as well. It's tough to read the situation with Edmonton. The forward one, to me, that does feel like Holloway's replacement. But the defensive side is where it just gets more difficult because of what we're talking about of, you can never have too many defensemen. And you can match Broberg, a guy that does still have potential. Maybe if you're the Edmonton Oilers, you say, you know what, let's see if we can kind of mend fences with him. If he develops, let's see if we can make this work. We can convince ourselves that maybe we can change his mind and then we can ultimately keep a top 4 defenseman or even potentially a top pairing defenseman long-term here in Edmonton. It's going to be interesting to see what their decision is because if they do decide to go the route of let's let them both walk, get those draft picks, they did seem to potentially find those guys replacements. But they also may have just been looking for some reinforcements on the defensive side of things and do still want to keep Broberg. It's going to be an interesting decision from the Edmonton Oilers. I truly hope we get to see it today because I'm tired of waiting, if I'm being completely honest.
I told you guys what I feel like is in high school when you're waiting for that girl to text you back and she just doesn't text. No? Didn't happen to you, buddy? No, I'd say AOL Instant Messenger, but you two would look at me like I didn't know what the hell you're saying. But you're waiting for that text to get back?
40 in a couple weeks?
Yeah, probably. You get those ellipses, 3 dots, and you're like, oh, she's texting, and then they don't text. I'm like, you son of a. So you have to wait. And here, the one more thing I wanted to mention before we hit a break. Yes, there's been a lot of people that are saying that the Oilers can match both of these offers. They'll be cap compliant if they put Evander Kane on LTIR, and they're good to go. One thing that you will have to remember is Evander Kane, we heard both Spector and Nugent Bowman tell us that Kane's not expected to be on it all season. Probably be on it till about January or February, but he will be back before the end of the season. You can't manipulate the cap that way. If they do that, they would have to move on from somebody who's making more than $2.3 million. And those players that fall into that criteria, Brett Kulak, and then all of your better defensemen, so you're talking Bouchard, Broberg, which you can't trade, Ekholm, Darnell Nurse, and then you're talking Jeff Skinner, Adam Henrique, Victor Arvidsson, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Kane, Hyman, Draisaitl, McDavid. You have to move on from one of those players if you want to be cap compliant, or send multiple guys down to waivers, which you might lose them, which means you're playing with a shortened roster, which most teams aren't going to be doing that one. So just one thing to keep in mind. Again, not any expectation. Edmonton doesn't have to respond with these offer sheets until 9:30 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow, but Mark Spector said last night that he does anticipate Edmonton making an announcement later on today, so we'll keep you abreast of that if anything does come about. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get to questions and answers. You send us questions to our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. We'll give you answers, but coming up next, get some NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friend and insurance agent, Tracy Bibb. You need to call her today and get with the right insurance agency, taking care of you with your car and home insurance. And when I mean taking care of you, she's saving you money with competitive rates. She's also always staying in contact with you, which I do find so important. A lot of people have never even spoke to their insurance agent. Now imagine having somebody who's always contacting you, making sure everything is good, making sure you understand what falls underneath the umbrella. And when something goes wrong, because look, something will go wrong at some point with your car, with your home, Tracy's there to answer and get your problem solved. And right now they're doing the quote for the cause, teaming up with the Riz Show and The Point. Make sure you contact her, because if you call just for a free non-committal quote, Tracy and her team will donate to the great cause. Quote for the cause going on right now. So give her a call today and just tell Tracy Alex Ferrario sent you. She'll walk you through the entire thing. Free non-committal quote. 314-328-4260. That's 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
Greg Francis here with a Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals dropped 2 of 3 over the weekend to the Dodgers. They lost 7-6 on Friday and 2-1 yesterday. Saturday they took home a winner 5-2 over the Dodgers. Cardinals now 2 games below 500, sitting at 61-63 on the season. They're 5 games back of Atlanta for that final wild card position and 11 games back of Milwaukee for the division lead. They'll be off today and welcome in those Milwaukee Brewers tomorrow to start a 3-game set at Busch Stadium. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Let's get some NFL quick hitters with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Again, questions and answers coming up in our next segments. You can send your questions over to our Air Comfort Service text line, 314-399-9646. You can also send them over on our YouTube chat, The Graveyard, at 101 ESPN STL. Let's start with this piece from ESPN. They put together their list of teams most likely to improve from the games that they won the previous season. So I don't want to go through their list. I want to come up with our own list, guys. I want everybody to give me their 3 teams that you believe will be better than what they were last season. So their record that they had last year, they'll be better than who they were the previous season. I'll start this one off because the first one for me, I believe will be better, are the Houston Texans. They were 10-7 last year. I think you're talking about a team that can win 11 or 12 games. I know I'm super hyped on the Houston Texans right now, but I think at the end of it, they'll be the 3rd best team in the AFC next season, right behind the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. One other team in the AFC that I have on this one are the New York Jets. Do I like this pick? Absolutely not. But if you're healthy, which I think is the important caveat to put in this, you're talking about more than 7 wins last season. And if Aaron Rodgers is healthy, I think he can win 7 games in his sleep with this team. So I think they're the second one. The third one for me on this one, and it might surprise some people, maybe not, because I've bashed on this quarterback a lot. It's the Arizona Cardinals. I don't think you're 4 wins bad. I think you've gotten the weapons. You've got Marvin Harrison Jr. now. If Kyler Murray is healthy and stays consistent and stays away from cotting it up on the weekends, I think you're talking about at least a team that can push for a wild card spot, which would be 7 or 8 wins. So those are my 3 teams that I think will be better than what they were last year.
Yeah, the Cardinals one's interesting. I didn't have them on my list, but I like your thought process there because I could see where they end up becoming a better football team. The ones for me, I do agree with the Jets. I think the Jets can win the East this year as long as Rodgers is healthy. They've got an unbelievable defense. The fact that they won 7 games with Zach Wilson, who was seeing ghosts the entire time he was on the field.
They really won 7 games because Garrett Wilson was able to do the impossible, and the same with Breece Hall.
Yeah, like if they can win 7 with Zach Wilson, they can win 11 or 12 with Aaron Rodgers.
Right.
So that one I am 100% with you. I think you're going to see them significantly improve. One for me that I think is going to be kind of a sneaky, could finish above 500, maybe be like right around there at 9-8 potentially, is the Tennessee Titans.
Yeah.
I like what they did in the offseason. They added weapons around Will Levis. I don't know if Will Levis is the guy for the Tennessee Titans, but at least you're going to find out this season. And if he plays well, you're going to see where they can become a 9-win team potentially in the AFC. And then the other one for me that I think you're going to see significant improvement on is the Atlanta Falcons. They again, another team where I'm like, man, I can't believe they won 7 games last year with Desmond freaking Ritter, and I can't remember who the other quarterback was. Oh, our boy Taylor Heineke, yeah. I think. I think they're probably a 10-win team this season.
That was the one that I was like, oh, obviously they'll be better. Man, I don't know. I think maybe you get 1 more win than 7. I just kind of wonder if they're going to be right around that couple games below 500 mark. Grant, who do you got?
So the Falcons and the Texans were my big 2. The other one that I had, and it's literally just because Mason Rudolph isn't their quarterback, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, I know.
Who is their quarterback, though?
See, the funny thing is watching them in the preseason so far, I'm going, they're probably going to be the same team again.
I was going to say, man, more than 10 wins seems like a pipe dream.
But if they did it with Mason Rudolph,
I get it, but like, at least they had a defined quarterback. This one's like, hey, every week could be Russell Wilson or Justin Fields.
It went from Kenny Pickett, then it went to
but Kenny Pickett was like, yeah.
Like it was all over the place last year. At least now they have, somebody that actually has talent in Justin Fields. Like, say what you want about him, I think he's got potential.
I love Justin Fields.
Under the right situation, I think he's going to be better than a lot of people are giving him credit for. So I think the Steelers are going to be an improved team.
Speaking of teams that won't be better than what they were last year, everybody on board with the Las Vegas Raiders are going to suck once again now that they've named Gardner Minshew as their starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Like, if that's the guy that first of all, Devontae Adams is pretty much gone. If you're going with Gardner Minshew, I mean, they're in a tough spot no matter what. I like their defense. I like some of the playmakers that they have there. But man, Gardner Minshew is your quarterback. Like, I'm sorry, that's maybe good for 5 wins.
Yeah, I like Gardner Minshew. He falls in like the category of the journeyman quarterback that can potentially be the stopgap till you find your guy. But they just, I don't know. I look at the Las Vegas Raiders. I think they're probably better than 5 wins. I think what they finished with last year, 7? Damn, they finished with 8.
They finished with 8.
I think they're probably like a 7-win team, 8-win team still. Like Gardner Minshew's an okay quarterback. Now, it is a little alarming. Like if you've seen him so far this preseason, like yesterday was the game, or this past weekend where they played the Cowboys. Their head coach come out and says, okay, we're going to name a starting quarterback after this game. And then both Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell did not look that great. and he settles
Surprise,
with
surprise.
Gardner Minshew. So, like, look, maybe I'm on a pipe dream of, hey, he can probably be in that kind of Jacoby Brissett, Teddy Bridgewater range of just be the stopgap quarterback. You're going to win like 6 to 8 games. But, yeah, we'll see what happens with the Las Vegas race. You're not in a good spot if you have to settle with Gardner Minshew as your starting quarterback.
Your mom's boyfriend on our graveyard chat just said Minshew's no worse than Derek Carr. Exactly. No worse than Derek Carr. And the Saints were 9-8 last year.
Yeah.
And like
Stuck in the middle.
At least the Saints have a couple of playmakers on offense. You, if you're the Raiders, have a disgruntled Devontae Adams who Gardner Minshew's going to be throwing the ball to him. I'm not on board with that team. Another team that named their quarterback, which I'm excited for this one. The quarterback class of rookies that we're going to see this year should get you pretty hyped. And honestly, fantasy football-wise, it's made things very difficult throughout the mock drafts of like, hey, do I wait and see if I could get some of these guys? Denver Broncos looks like they're going to be going with Bo Nix to start QB or start this first season as their top quarterback. Preseason action, I didn't watch any of this, but the stat lines kind of speak for themselves. 8 for 9 with 80 pass yards and 1 touchdown. If you're the Denver Broncos, that's the best case scenario, that this dude gets the start as the week 1 quarterback, and you just start the development for a team that was hopefully going to be close to 500.
Well, you don't have faith in Zach Wilson?
No, I don't think Zach Wilson has faith in Zach Wilson.
Get clobbered in that game over the weekend.
I think there's teams in the NHL that or the NFL that say like, let's see how hard we can hit Zach Wilson.
Oh man, they had them pit. I think it was the only 2 points. I think it was the Packers they were playing, if I remember correctly. And he like drops back. He sees the defensive lineman. You saw him like go into a shell. He got crushed. It was the safety. It's the only points the Packers got in that game. But
that dude sees ghosts every time he drops back.
Bo Nix looks impressive in the preseason. Now, granted, again, it's preseason. You know, playing a bunch of backups.
T-Bone could look impressive in preseason.
I don't know if I'd go that far. I just couldn't play with the pads on. But when you hear some of the numbers, I mean, you mentioned a stat line from the game over the weekend. He's had 7 drives so far this preseason in 2 games. They scored points on 6 of the 7. Again, take it with a grain of salt. It is the preseason, but that's pretty impressive from the rookie in Bo Nix. He's looked like, okay, I wouldn't go as far as say like, oh, that's the franchise guy, or look at what he's doing. He looks like the starter for the Broncos. Now, that doesn't say a lot.
Yeah, better than Russell Wilson.
Zach Wilson's on that roster for the Denver Broncos, but I think he has a chance to potentially be better than what I thought based on what I've seen so far in the preseason.
Would you have the Broncos slated at second in that division?
No. I think they're still the worst team in that division. I think it's going to be like them and the Chargers battling with like 5 wins. I think the Raiders are the second team best team in that division. And that's just because like they have Devontae Adams, and if you can just get him the ball, you've got yourself a chance.
I think they're all going to be battling for second in that division. It's going to be the NL Central of the NFL.
I think they're going to all finish below 500 like they did last year. All 3 teams outside of the Chiefs finish below 500. I think that's going to be the case again this year.
God, that's going to be a miserable division to watch. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex.
Mahomes is winning in an easy division.
Average quarterback at best. He's just winning in a bad division.
Like, he should be benched for behind the back throw, you know?
No, man. We need creativity in the NFL. It was pretty nifty. All right, let's get to questions and answers on the other side. You send us your questions, 314-399-9646. We'll answer them next on BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN.
You've got questions, we may have the answers. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's Questions and Answers.
Presented by Window World St. Louis.com. Simply the best for less.
314-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. Also our YouTube chat, The Graveyard, over at 101 ESPN STL, where you can send your questions in to us, and we will answer them here on BK and Ferrario. Let's start here. Guys, do you think the agents for either Gorman or Walker will be asking for a trade?
No.
If you're an agent for those two guys who are, 2 years and 3 years into their professional careers, maybe longer than that if I'm not mistaken, you have no leverage to ask for a trade.
Yeah, no. Baseball is, I hear people bring this up all the time. Well, Walker should demand a trade. The Cardinals aren't handling him right. Guys, it's not football. It's not basketball. It doesn't happen in Major League Baseball. Arenado's the rare exception. And you know what? We may have found out that why he may have did that. I don't expect those guys to be requesting trades. They're going to work on trying to develop. They're going to try and work to, you don't want to get the rap as being a bad teammate because that affects your market. So I don't think that those guys are going to be requesting trades. And you're 100% right. They have no leverage at all. They're young big leaguers. It's not like they're where Arenado's case where it was he had a big contract and had an opt-out, by the way. He had the leverage. He had legitimate leverage over the Colorado Rockies.
Yeah, there's just no way if I'm Walker or Gorman's agent, they call me and say, I went out of St. Louis, I'm saying, suck it up until you get some major league reps under your belt, and then we can talk. But right now, you're stuck where you're at. Guys, if Chaim Bloom takes over as president of baseball operations next season, what do you feel should be his first order of business?
Oh.
I like Ollie. I think it's going to have to be bringing a different manager. Not saying that the manager is the problem because roster construction is the problem, but if I'm Chaim Bloom, the first order of business is going to be bringing in my guy who can bring in the coaching staff that I feel is best.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't make that my first move. I would probably try and run it back another year with Ollie and let him see what he thinks. I do think, Ollie's in such a tough spot because if there is a new Pobo that comes in, typically what happens is they give the coach a year to see what they can do, and then they'll make a decision, and it feels like most of the time they decide to go a different way. If I'm Chaim Bloom, I'm not necessarily looking at the managerial staff because, I think we've talked about this. I think there's 5 managers in baseball that impact a team.
For sure.
And there's 5 that actively hurt their team. And I hate to tell Cardinals fans, Ollie's not either of those. So he's just kind of stuck in the muddy middle. And the odds are the guy you hire is going to be stuck in the muddy middle. I think the first move that you make if you're Chaim Bloom is internally, I think you're trying to figure out why are we not developing these young hitters? Why is it that a Jordan Walker is struggling at the big league level? Why is it that Nolan Gorman is struggling? And honestly, I think then you start to kind of look and say, okay, depending on what we have money-wise, how do we go out and continue to improve our rotation? They're going to have to be a team that's continued to add starting pitching. So that would be probably the first thing that he's going to try and do. He's going to probably try and implement, and it'll probably be something that's more behind the scenes, some sort of, I don't know if you want to call it, whether it be a pitching lab, some sort of pitching philosophy that can hopefully in 3-4 years take over what the Boston Red Sox pitching is right now. I mean, you look at their rotation. Those are guys that Chaim Bloom acquired or drafted, and their rotation's one of the best in baseball. He's probably going to be looking to do something along those lines.
Yeah, I think you got one of two options. You got to make some type of change, big change to your roster in terms of a trade, which Chaim Bloom's no stranger to, or you change the coaching staff, and I think it's going to be one of those two options if he takes over next season. Fellas, if the Blues acquire both Broberg and Holloway, I like the optimism, could you see Army making moves to trim down this roster? For example, Brandon Saad could probably get you a second-round draft pick coming back. Yes, but not right away. I think right now you have the luxury of saying that, hey, we're a team that can make the playoffs with this roster, and if Holloway develops and you're in the playoff race, well, then you can make a decision of, do we want to move on from Brandon Saad at the trade deadline? Because his is a modified no trade. So if a team wants him and you're on the cusp of a playoff run and you've got pieces of Bolduc's ready to come up, you've got Holloway who's performing well, you could look to move that. And if your team stinks, well, then you trade some assets for draft picks. I do think you could get a second-round draft pick seems a lot. I do think you could probably get somewhere around a third or a fourth for Brandon Saad at the trade deadline.
Oh, really? I think you could probably get a second for Saad at the deadline because he's got another year of control. And, like, by that point at the deadline, if you eat some salary, like, he's barely going to count against the cap. Like, he might be like $1 million against the cap. I think they could potentially get a second-round pick.
I don't know if the Blues eat any of the salary, though. That's the thing.
I guess it's fair because it would carry over into next year. That's
and
fair.
I think the Blues are going to want as much salary as possible.
I think if you're the Blues, like, you could take that on if you wanted to. Like, if you wanted to eat 50%
because, I mean, your roster's essentially in place.
And, like, it's just a year, and you're in the midst of a retool. So, like, next year on the books, Saad's cap hit would count for, like, $2.25 million. Okay, that's not too bad necessarily. So I think they could. I do agree with you that, you know, it's possible they could look to move Brandon Saad, but I do agree it would be trade deadline. And he would be coveted after teams because we talk about he doesn't pass, but he's a playoff performer. And he's a guy like, I can write in pen today, Brandon Saad's going to score 20 goals for the St. Louis Blues. I don't know how he's going to do it, but I know he's going to do it.
I think I'd be more interested in what they do with the left-handed defensemen. Like, all of their left-handed defensemen, obviously all of them can't play.
I think that's simpler. I think that's you send Tyler Tucker and both Scott Perunovich to the American Hockey League through waivers.
Yeah.
Tucker clears it, in my opinion. 7th-round pick who's got some NHL experience, but I don't think anybody's claiming that to put on their roster. Scott Perunovich might get claimed, but if you've got Philip Broberg, I don't know if you really care if Scott Perunovich gets claimed because you've got Pierre-Olivier Joseph, you've got Tyler Tucker. I think the left-handed defenseman is an easy decision for Doug Armstrong if you get Broberg. If you don't get Broberg, changes everything.
And I could see where maybe Perunovich gets claimed, like a team that's rebuilding, like
I
the
could
Sharks,
see San Jose claiming him,
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense
or
for them
honestly,
to claim him.
Edmonton.
Sure.
I could see Edmonton be like, hey, we lost Broberg. Let's just go get. That's why, I mean, the scenario is still in front of you to where they could be negotiating a trade right now of saying, we can't match these guys, but we need more than a 2nd and 3rd round draft pick. That's where Scott Perunovich's name could come into play. So there's just a lot of different scenarios with it. But the roster is going to be fluent if they do acquire both of these players, which, again, that's really up in the air right now. With Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Speaking of up in the air, it's Cardinals team right now and what their future looks like. And once again, T-Bone, deja vu, sure seems like we have a divide between the front office and the manager. We'll discuss that next here on 101 ESPN.
just not going to bring someone up to bring someone up. He's young. If he comes up, he's got to play. And, more importantly, I'd like to see him, string together a few great weeks.
So that was John Mozeliak, president of baseball operations, who spoke with the media at the trade deadline. And that was before we found out about Jordan Walker being brought up. And that was in the midst of his hot streak in Memphis. And then we'd later go on to find out that the Cardinals recalled Jordan Walker. With Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. It seems from the quotes we're hearing from John Mozeliak and the actions we're seeing with Ali Marmol, we're once again seeing a divide between the front office and the manager. And I know that probably doesn't sound like a surprise to a lot of Cardinals fans because that's been the story since Mike Matheny was here. I mean, they had to go out and trade an outfielder from this team because Mike Matheny continued to play said outfielder. And then, of course, they had the philosophical differences with Mike Schilt, and now you're seeing it with Jordan Walker. But this was the most recent quote from John Mozeliak, who said this on KMOX Cardinals Radio Network on Sunday. Quote, in terms of my philosophy, in terms of how do you think of a young players, they do need to be playing. Ultimately, we just have to look at what the schedule looks like, who we're facing, and map out a plan. If we're not going to find everyday at-bats for him, then we may have to rethink that. You have to remind yourself that he's still young, he's still growing as a player. End quote. Jordan Walker, since he has been recalled for the Cardinals, has seen, let me double check this math, 4 total games where he has started for the Cardinals, and in those 4 games, he has 1 hit, has struck out 3 times. T-Bone, it seems like we're right back to square one with this of John Mozeliak wants to get these guys playing times, and whether you read that as him waving the white flag because the team's out of it, however you want to read it with John Mozeliak is up for discussion. But Mo expected playing time for Jordan Walker, which is why they brought him back up. Ali Marmol looks at it and says he's getting in against lefties, and that's the best opportunity for him, and that's the best opportunity for my team to win. And there lies the problem with this Cardinals team. It's what we opened up talking about, roster development and where this team is at and the struggles that they're in the between of. You called up Jordan Walker to continue the progress. And now he's not getting everyday at-bats, and you're stunting the growth of Jordan Walker, hence the philosophical differences, for a lack of a better phrase, between John Mozeliak and Ali Marmol.
Yeah, I can't believe we are here with the Cardinals again.
I can.
It's just, it's unbelievable that, okay, so if you actually feel this way, Mo, that, it is better set for us as an organization for Jordan Walker, if he is going to be here, to play every day or to continue to develop in the minor leagues. Shouldn't that conversation be had with the guy that writes the lineup card in Ali Marmol? Shouldn't the conversation be, hey, Matt Carpenter's going to be going on the 10-day IL. Okay, how do we best suit ourselves to kind of replace him?
Well, shouldn't the conversation be, Ali, what do you need? And that's another outfielder. Okay, well, let's find another guy who could play outfield that's not Jordan Walker.
Sure, but at this point, like, now you're past the trade deadline. That part is difficult. So it's like, okay, now we need to search internally in our organization. Do you have that guy that can do that? Jose Fermin is starting to get starts in the outfield at Memphis if you wanted to go that route. But what I don't understand is, okay, I agree. Jordan Walker, if he's up here, needs to be playing. And I understand he's not producing so far in the 4 games since he's been called up. He's 1 for 11 so far since being recalled. I agree. He's got to be up here if he's going to be. He's got to be playing if he's going to be up here. But if you know the manager's not going to play him, and he's going to say, "Okay, we're going to go with a platoon," then why'd you call up Jordan Walker?
Right.
Because he's better suited for however many days he's going to end up being here. Let's call it 10. Let's just say it's the minimum for Matt Carpenter being on the IL. Well, he's better suited to be developing in AAA for those 10 days, starting every single day, continuing to get at bats while he's in the midst of a heater, by the way, for his development both in the short term and the long term. Him coming up here just kind of stalls that out a little bit. Now he's back up here at the major leagues. He's not getting at-bats every single day. And, I kind of understand this from Ollie's perspective of, hey, my job right now is to get us to the postseason. And if you haven't seen, we're kind of scuffling a little bit. I don't want to throw out a guy that maybe I don't necessarily feel is ready to go up against right-handed pitching and say, you know what, I think it is better for us to have a platoon if he's going to be up here. So if that's the case, if I'm John Mozeliak, my conversations with Ollie should lead me to go, okay, maybe we need to bring up whether it be a Jose Fermin or a Luken Baker. And I understand those guys don't play the outfield, but just
you don't
bring
need
up
an outfielder. You need a bat.
Exactly. Just bring up a right-handed bat that can help your bench. And the part that is so frustrating about it, and it's why, like I said at the very beginning of this, I can't believe we're freaking here again. This is the third manager in a row in which we've had this issue.
Yep.
Think back to Mike Matheny when Mo hired him. What happens in, I believe it's 2014? And look, that team was good, but you know what happened in 2014? They bring up Oscar Taveras, another one of their top hitting prospects. Mo calls him up with the expectation of, okay, Matheny's going to play him every single day. Well, Matheny doesn't. He sticks with his veteran, Alan Craig. So what does Mo have to do? Well, he has to trade Alan Craig. So Matheny will play the young guy. Okay, now we move on to the Schilt era. What happens? Mike Schilt starts playing a lot of the veterans, trusts his veterans a lot. It's why you see Matt Carpenter in the lineup, even though he's really going through it at times. Okay, so now we move on to the Oli Marmol era, where it is, okay, surely third time's a charm they've learned. When we have these young guys up, they're going to play. There's going to be this communication between ownership and the manager's spot. And now we're back at the same freaking point. How does that happen? That's inexcusable from the St. Louis Cardinals. 3 managers in a row in which the front office is saying, we want the young guys to play. And what happens? The manager says, well, if they're going to be here, they're not going to play because I don't think it's best suited for the team. It's inexcusable from the front office to have that perspective of, well, if they're going to be here, they got to play. Well, no, communicate with the manager and figure out what he wants and what he's going to do with that player, because it is so much better for Jordan Walker right now if he's not going to be starting every single day to be at the AAA level developing, because he is such an important piece for their future past 2024.
Yeah, and that's what's so infuriating about seeing Jordan Walker go through this and then hearing comments of like, well, he's going to go up against left-handed pitchers, and right now our best chance to win is to use him in a platoon role. And I look at the way that these players have been performing that have been filling in on the outfield. And yes, I know Lars Nootbaar had a good weekend, but prior to that, Lars Nootbaar was not performing well. And that's a guy who's going up against right-handed pitchers that you don't want Jordan Walker to be going up against. Left-handed side. And I know Jordan Walker's been getting those reps, but have you looked at Tommy Pham's numbers in the same amount of time that Jordan Walker's been playing? Because his numbers aren't that great either. Like you're sitting here saying, well, we have to play these guys because they give us the best chance to win, and Jordan Walker's not ready to take on that role, but yet the guys that you continue to play aren't giving you a chance to win. And look, I'm not putting all of the blame on Ollie. I do think a lot of the blame goes to John Mozeliak in this sense, because you've hired managers for 3 straight times that are first-year managers that put the pressure on themselves to say, what do I need to do in St. Louis? I need to make the postseason. It's not about developing players. It's not about kind of making sure that we're progressing in the right direction. When a guy gets hired by the Cardinals who has never managed at the major league level, and 2 of the 3 guys have been in the Cardinals system in the minor leagues working with them, guess what they believe? Only way to success is making the playoffs. And guess how I get to the playoffs? Not playing the younger players.
See, that's where I don't necessarily agree with that. I think what they are saying is, because what you said of those guys coming up through the system in Schilt and Ollie, they understand what it takes to develop the players, and it's at bats. But when you get to the big leagues, you know what your job is not? And Craig Berube said this when he was fired. His job's not to develop those guys. His job is to win. So now you find yourself in a tough spot of, okay, I've got to win while also developing the guys. The nice part about the baseball season is it's a marathon. So you get the first, 3 months. You can play guys. They did this with Walker this year. They played him for, the first month or so?
And they sent him down.
Because he wasn't hitting. Okay, so, I get that. It's okay, do we continue to ride with Jordan Walker right now and see if we can develop him here at the big league level? Or is it better suited for him to go down and work on things, get away from the pressure, and also help our big league roster and try and win in the right now? And that was the decision they went with. The problem is how do you get back to a point where it is there's just this lack of communication of, okay, we have a roster spot because Carpenter's on the IL. What should we do with it? And the response is from the front office of, okay, well, we are going to call up Jordan Walker. Okay, well, if you're going to call up Jordan Walker with the expectations he's going to get at-bats regularly, don't you need to know if the manager's going to do that? That's what I don't understand is how does this happen to where you have these conversations of, oh, well, we're going to call up Jordan Walker. Yeah, well, he's going to be a platoon bat. Well, okay, is the front office okay with that? Because right now the front office is telling people on the Cardinals radio network of, hey, if Walker's up here, he's going to have to be playing every day. And if he's not, he's going to be going down to the minors. Well, So I guess he's going back to the minors here soon when Carpenter's ready to be activated because Cardinals aren't starting him every day. Again, it's not Ollie's job to get Walker at bats right now. Ollie would give Jordan Walker at bats if he thought, okay, he is our best option right now against right-handed pitchers or left-handed pitchers.
Here's my pushback with that, though, and I could be completely off on this. But isn't your job as the manager, yes, it's to make the playoffs, but isn't your job to develop the players in the system so that they are progressing for you in the future? And if the guy has done what he's needed to do in Memphis, the next step is to get to the major leagues and develop. And I completely understand that, yeah, the job is to win. This is why it's such a tough spot to be in if you're Ollie, because you've got to develop while you're winning. And I don't envy where he's at right now. And if you're looking at this team from the perspective of they need to win, he's probably making the right decisions. But if I'm the manager of a team and I know that there is a youth movement coming, there are younger players that are going to be relied upon to be everyday players, is it my job also to make sure that that player is developing and getting time to develop?
Not today. In April and in May and in June, you can work on development.
And that's where my problem lied, because it ended in April and they said, let's send him down.
And again, I don't have an issue with them sending him down in April because, like, it's not like it was struggling where it was like, okay, he's hitting 210, he's hitting a little power, not getting on base. No, he was, like, bad. Jordan Walker was awful in the first part of the season. I'm looking at his total stat line from the season, batting 145, 232 slug, a 460 OPS. That's terrible. So I understand why you send him down. But to me, the first 3 months of the season, and Ollie kind of made reference to this, not in terms of development, but he talked about platoons post-game yesterday, and he mentioned, everyday guys prove to be everyday guys. And then at some point, if you start to see guys struggle against lefties, well, what do? Now they go into a platoon at this point in the season. This point in the season is the sprint. The season as a whole is a marathon. Well, we're past the part of the marathon. We're in the home stretch. There's less than 40 games to go. It's time to go, 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 go. And if you're going to operate as an organization that still believes you can get into the playoffs, well, you're going to be playing everybody that is best suited that you think in particular matchups. So against righties, that means Lars Nootbaar's in the lineup. Against lefties, I guess currently that means Jordan Walker's in the lineup. It's not his job as of today to be developing Jordan Walker. If the Cardinals were out of it and they said it was like last year, last year they're out of it by this point. I think it was just a couple days ago they called up Mason Wynn a year ago. That makes sense because you're going to play him every day. You don't care about the matchup. That, at that point, because you're out of the playoff race, says it is time for development. If you're going to operate that we're still a playoff contender and our goal is to get to the playoffs, it is best suited for Ollie Marmol to play the best available lineup every single day and not worry about the development for Jordan Walker. That's Mo's job.
And if I were having this conversation with Ollie, I'd look at him and say, well, doing what you were doing prior didn't make you any closer to a playoff team, because from August 1st all the way up until Jordan Walker was recalled, you won 4 games. 1 against the Cubs, 2 against the Rays, 1 against the Kansas City Royals, which means you lost in total 6 games. You went 4-6 in those 10 games of doing what you're doing right now. And when you called up Jordan Walker, you've won once out of 6 games.
And what I mentioned there last of what I'm trying to get across of with it's Mo's job here. At this point in the season, it's Ollie's job to manage the roster that he has the best way possible to try and get the Cardinals to the playoffs. In like 3 weeks, or maybe not even that. By the time
I would say a week.
I would say a week to maybe even by the time we get to September.
Series?
A week, or maybe by the time we get to September, we may be back in the mode of, okay, now it's Ollie Marmol's job again to develop these guys. Now it is, what, Jordan Walker's here, Jordan Walker plays.
That's just such a tough thing to do when you have a month to develop a guy.
Right now, when you're in the sprint of the season, and again, when I say develop, I mean more of just get him at bats, have him learn at the big league level. I don't think like this 1 month's going to suddenly become where it is, Jordan Walker figured it out, and now he's going to be the superstar next year. My point, though, is right now it is Ollie's job for the sprint to manage this roster the best that he has. Right now it's Mo's job to do what's best for the players and these young guys in their development that are in the minor leagues. And that's why I have such an issue with him saying, we're going to call up Jordan Walker because there's a hole and we need a right-handed bat. Okay, well, Jordan Walker's a different... he's totally different on the spectrum in terms of, okay, do we call him up for the right-handed bat, or do we just give Jose Fermin a guy that's not in your future? He's here on the 40-man. Why? To provide depth, not to be the guy that's supposed to be the Cardinals' starting right fielder for the next 10 years and be the superstar you've been waiting for.
Well, coming up in 15 minutes, they traded away another superstar that they were waiting for. We'll discuss that, but coming up next, you send us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out. Coming up next here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. 214-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. You can also send us a message over on our YouTube chat, The Graveyard, at 101 ESPN STL with Tanner Hendrickson, with Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. It is time for In or Out. You send us a scenario. We will tell you if we are in or out. Guys, let's start with this. In or out. I'm going to go simple. Blues get both players from the Edmonton Oilers.
Oh, man. I'm going to stick with what I said earlier. I'm going to say out. I think the Oilers are going to match Broberg. I think the Blues will end up with Holloway. I think you're still going to see Edmonton say, you know what? It's too important for us to have Broberg. He could potentially be a top 4 defenseman. We'll see if we can kind of smooth things over after we made him upset, and hopefully he can develop here at Edmonton. So I'm going to say out.
Which one? We're all in the same agreement. We all want Broberg.
Yeah.
That's where
Sorry,
we're all
Holloway.
at,
Yeah.
right? Okay. What'd you say?
Sorry, Holloway.
Yeah, sorry, Dylan. God, it's going to suck.
if you're here, it's gonna be
going to
great.
suck if he gets clean. Like, we're happy, man.
I'm so torn on this. And if the Oilers wouldn't have traded for Carlson, I would say that they would be keeping Holloway. But because they did, I think I'm going to go in on this because I think they need cap space so bad.
I'm convinced, Grant. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm just trying to be optimistic on this and convincing myself like you are, Alex, but
It's fine, man. We all do it.
I'm just trying to make sense of the trades that they made and looking at their cap space situation. They need this cap so bad for their future signings, so I'm going to go in on it.
T-Bone, what do you got?
Guys, in or out, when Michael Ciani returns, Victor Scott will remain on the roster.
In. Because I think Jordan Walker's going to go down.
And the reason I ask is because Ciani started a little hitting progression this week. He's been doing some running, some fielding. I wouldn't doubt that it's possible he returns by the time we get to September when rosters expand, which is what makes it interesting.
That is interesting because then, like, do you still send Jordan Walker down? Do you have other roster decisions? Where's the team at in this sense? I don't think you're sending Victor Scott down because Victor Scott, although I've been making the argument for Jordan Walker of, like, you got to play. Victor Scott's legit showing signs of progress. He's great defensively for you, and the at-bats have not been what they were at the first month of the season. He's like a Mason Wynn to me, where it's like, now you just let this and you run the rest of the season so we can go into the offseason and prep to be a full-time center fielder next year. So I'll say I'm in on this one.
I'm going to go in as well. I don't think they're sending Victor Scott down when Michael Ciani comes back.
Michael Sinise.
Right. So, for me, I was watching NHL Network last night.
Of course you were, nerd.
They pissed me off, Bruce Boudreau and Corey Schneider did, because they put out their top 10 list of goaltenders in the NHL this past season, and Jordan Binnington was on neither of those lists. So, in or out this upcoming season, Jordan Binnington will finish as a finalist in the Vezina conversation. So, in the top 3 for Vezina votes.
Man, I'll say in on this. I mean, you guys know me. I'm the ultimate Jordan Binnington honk. But if you do find a way to get Philip Broberg, I think your defense is already improved with Ryan Suter playing on your team, who's probably going to be getting good minutes for you. I'll say I'm in on this because as great as he was last year, I don't know how much he's going to have to rely on being the savior in the back end, which means the numbers might move up a little bit more. And if he was barely on the outside looking in last year, I'm going to say in on this. He's a finalist for this.
I will say, I'll say in as well. I think if he has another season like last year, there'll be a little bit more people that recognize it. I was frankly shocked he wasn't a finalist this year, but I can see where he ends up becoming where it is, back-to-back seasons, people kind of start to wash away that bad taste in their mouth from that previous season where we all agree in this room, though Benner's numbers were bad, they weren't necessarily his fault because of all the backdoor tap-ins that were being allowed. But I'll say I'm in on this.
I'm in as well. If he has a season like he did last year, and again, Alex, as you said, like if they're able to bring Broberg in and the defense is even better than it was last season, it's ridiculous that he wasn't in the conversation this season for the Vezina. And
the third best goal saved above average in the NHL. Like, it's absurd.
He should be in the conversation next year, so I'm in as well.
All right, let's get to some of these on our Air Comfort Service text line. In or out, Cardinals aren't competitive again until 2028 and miss the playoffs all the way until then. Jesus.
I'm around in 2028.
I think we all hope we're around in 2028.
They're going to be competitive again. I'm going to say out just to be
optimistic. You always do that, man. Opportunist.
Should have gotten a dictionary for my birthday?
Or a thesaurus, either one.
Yeah, either one. I will say out, though. if Walker develops, and some of this pitching that's down in the minor leagues in Double-A, Quinn Matthews is legit, Tink Hintz is legit, and I'm not saying like those guys have to be aces. If those guys end up hitting, and you've got Sonny Gray on the contract, and he has a bounce back year and limits home runs, I will say they can still be pretty competitive. I don't think they're going to have to wait until 2028. Plus, if Burleson's real, Mason Wynn's real, what you're seeing, they've got pieces. So I will say out on this.
I mean, we're talking 4 years from now. In that time frame, the White Sox could make the playoffs.
Well, you've been about as bad as they've been since the middle of July. So
I can't believe they've got. I think it's the second worst record.
They do.
Only behind the White Sox. I don't know. 4 years for the White Sox, Grant, feels a little.
A lot can happen in 4 years.
I know, but look at them.
Look at the Cardinals in 4 years.
Look at the White Sox.
This one's sending an in or out offseason edition. In or out, Matz, Lynn, Michaelis go. Gray, Fetty, Gibson, young guys. The Cardinals add an ace through money, I'm assuming free agency.
Out.
Save on Goldie, and they move Walker to first base and sign a high-end bat. That is a lot. I'm out on like 7 of these. First of all, you're not going to be able to move on from both Matz and Michaelis.
That one I could actually see.
I think you can move on from one of them. I don't think you can move on from both.
I think you can move on from both. Now, you have to eat some money. Which,
hence, you're not spending money on an ace through free agency.
Yeah, exactly.
I still don't buy they're going to move on from Goldschmidt. I think he becomes a platoon bat for them. Walker's not a first baseman, and they're not going to sign the high-end bat. So out on almost all of those right now. In or out, the Blues get Broberg or Holloway, and then they make a major impact on the team this year. So one of the guys.
I mean, especially if it's Broberg, like what he can do to that defense, that can be almost a reset button, in my opinion, to the top 4. Like, he played 7 games in the Stanley Cup final this past season and was a +8. Like, in the Stanley Cup final against the Florida Panthers, he can be massive for this team. Like, I think people are excited about it. I don't think people are excited enough, to be honest. Or maybe I'm just too excited.
No. I mean, I am. I got really sad last night.
I think if they're able to get Philip Broberg, I think that is huge for this retool.
I would say I think Broberg's the one that would have a big impact. Holloway could help out the team, but I think Broberg's the one that you look at and go, okay, now our top 4 feels like it can kind of be a shutdown top 4. You got Parayko and Letty, which we saw have success. If Broberg plays, I would hope with Kessel, for example, not Justin Falk. But even if Justin Falk has a bounce back season, and if Falk has a bounce back season, he was solid 2 years ago. So
I think Falk, and this is going to sound like a shot, it's not meant to be, but I think Falk bounces back when he's not playing with Torrey Krug every single game, and when he's healthy. I think those are 2 very important factors into Justin Falk.
Also, if Justin Falk is a third pairing defenseman, I think that's a more natural role for him at this point.
I'm going to say in on this, and I think even with Dylan Holloway, like, it's going to be a downer if you don't get Broberg. I think even Dylan Holloway could have more of an impact than people are giving it credit for. Not so much in his development, but it gives you another asset to trade if you want to try and acquire a left-handed defenseman down the road where the Cardinals are at. Okay, a couple more of these rapid-fire style. Cardinals will either sweep the Brewers or get swept by the Brewers. In or out?
Out. They'll win 1. That's what they do.
Out. I think they'll drop 2 or 3.
I mean, I think they get swept. In or out, Newt gets moved this offseason.
Out, because they should, but they won't.
I'll say out. They won't sell while his value's low. That's the Cardinals.
Yeah, I'll say out as well. I think if there's a left-handed bat that gets moved, it's either Donovan or Nolan Gorman. Final one, in or out, Krug has played his last game with the St. Louis Blues.
In. I worry he's not going to be able to pull. I worry that you may not be able to trade him because of the injury, and B, and honestly, I hope this isn't the case. I hope he's able to get healthy and be able to play again. It's the worst to watch athletes' careers end short
without their own decision.
Yeah, without it being their decision when their body fails them. So, but I think it's probably in. I don't think you'll see him lace up for the Blues again.
I won't say never, because I don't think you're going to be able to move him. And, if he gets healthy, maybe you look at it as a depth defenseman when there's more cap space and the cap goes up. I would say if Scott Perunovich is more likely to play his last game as a Blue if Broberg is here than Torrey Krug would be. All right, Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, Dylan Carlson. I know everybody's been keeping track of this one, has been tearing it up for the Tampa Bay Rays. How should we feel about another Cardinals outfielder getting away? We'll discuss that next here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals fell twice over the weekend to the Dodgers as they lost on Friday 7-6 and on Sunday 2-1. They did pick up one win on Saturday 5-2 over LA. Cardinals are now 2 games below 500, 61-63 on the season, 5 games behind Atlanta for the final wild card spot, and 11 back of the Brewers for the division lead. And they'll welcome in those Milwaukee Brewers this starting tomorrow as they're off today for a 3-game set at Busch Stadium. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
And the Rays are going to win it. A base hit off the bat of Carlson. And the Rays win this one in 12. It's an 8-7 final.
Death, taxes, and another Cardinals outfielder having success elsewhere. That, of course, is Dylan Carlson, the future superstar who had another big moment for the Tampa Bay Rays over the weekend. And with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Was that tongue-in-cheek? Probably, but there was also some honesty a part of that one. T-Bone decided to just, light Twitter on fire last night after the Cardinals lost to the Dodgers, which, by the way, man, timing next time. You don't tweet out success of former Cardinals after they lose a series.
Hey, man, I'm just here to present the facts.
Understandably so. T-Bone is an honest man, and he loves watching people cry.
Whether you like it or not.
So Dylan Carlson, since he has been traded to the Tampa Bay Rays, here is his slash line. He's got a 293 batting average, a 383 on-base percentage, a 537 slug, and a 920 OPS. I'm just going to give you some reference to that right now, T-Bone. Lars Nootbaar this season, a 231 batting average with a 322 on-base percentage, 385 slug, and a 707 OPS. I'm not going to come on this air and be hypocritical because I said it leading up to them trading Dylan Carlson. I will not be upset if Dylan Carlson goes on to have success because I truly believe he was never going to be what he is in Tampa here in St. Louis. But you also can't deny the facts of this is another outfielder that has gotten away from the Cardinals organization that was viewed as a starter, viewed as a big-time impact player for the future, and then slowly disintegrated into a platoon bat, that slowly disintegrated into a not even an option for us, and then gets moved. Dylan Carlson, Tyler O'Neill was never a platoon bat, but he was also never healthy enough for you.
He couldn't even be healthy to be a platoon bat.
Harrison Bader was never viewed as a big-time impact bat, but it was pretty evident that the injuries took over and it kind of slowly disintegrated. Randy Arozarena never got to that point. Adolis Garcia was basically passed on by a ton of players. You've got the Steven Piscotty, who never really panned out. Randall Grichuk, who I know BK gets upset when I bring his name up. The reason I'm doing this is I'm just going through the list of players that have not had success in St. Louis, that have gotten away and have had success elsewhere. And Dylan Carlson is just another example of why I'm concerned about Jordan Walker, why I'm concerned about Nolan Gorman. Does it look bad? Sure it does. But what really worries me is the roster construction or the roster development for a team that's trying to figure out who they are is having more implications on their future than maybe we're giving enough credit to.
Yeah, I think you're going to see Dylan Carlson cool down. And look, I'm not going to be afraid. I don't think Dylan Carlson was going to do this here in St. Louis. I had no issues with trading him at the deadline.
Me neither.
Because it's not like he didn't get an opportunity. Like you mentioned Randy Arozarena there. He had an opportunity, or he didn't get an opportunity, excuse me. And they traded him. They never really knew what they had with Randy Arozarena, even though he hit at every level. So that one, they deserve a lot of blame for.
That one is always set to the side because all of the others fall into the Carlson camp.
Carlson had his opportunity, and he struggled over the last 3 years, really struggled against right-handed pitching. So I understand the approach of, okay, let's make him a platoon bat. Okay, that makes sense to me. But my question is, if he goes off and has success in Tampa Bay, and look, I saw him in town when the Rays were here. I was at one of those games when he started. I think he had an RBI in one of them, if I remember correctly.
Of course he did.
And you know what? He just looks like a major league hitter again. And I don't know if that is, you know what, it's a change of scenery. He happens to be healthy. There's some confidence because the Rays are saying, you know what, our season's probably lost. Just go out there and play. And honestly, he wasn't even a starter when he got there. It required Richie Palacios getting hurt for them to say, okay, Dylan Carlson is now a starter. I don't know if some of this is confidence because he's getting an opportunity. I don't know if this is Carlson kind of having that aha moment of, wait, if I flame out here with the Tampa Bay Rays, one of the best organizations in all of baseball, my baseball career as a big leaguer is on the line.
Yep.
So maybe that happened. Or maybe there was something that the Cardinals didn't see that the Rays were able to discover with Dylan Carlson. Is there something that they were able to discover in his swing that the Cardinals couldn't unlock?
And that right there is my biggest concern. And we're seeing a ton of texts right now on our Air Comfort Service text line of, well, the coaching is flawed with the Cardinals. The development is flawed because they don't know how to untap this potential. That is my concern. And it's not just the offensive side. We've seen it for pitching as well, for certain guys that just went elsewhere and were able to unlock some type of specific skill that the Cardinals couldn't figure out. You saw Jordan Hicks. We've seen Jack Flaherty. I'm very concerned that there are other teams that see something with these hitters that say, okay, this is what you were doing. Try this. And when that happens, it's, oh, aha, now I know how to get back to this. And if that is the case, then that is where you need to start looking at making changes. If you have not figured out how to develop these guys in your system and you're telling them one thing when they can do something else, and I'm not going to be a fraud. I don't know schematically what has changed for these hitters. It just seems like he's more comfortable at the plate. I mean, that's a big-time problem.
If there was one outfielder that they traded that I looked at and said, okay, I just don't know if he's going to end up being one that gets away, it was Carlson. Because I looked at his, the peek under the hood, take a look at the numbers, and it tells you he doesn't hit the ball hard. Mm-hmm. So it tells you, and we've talked about this, you look at his 2021 season, kind of tells you, okay, maybe he was getting into a little bit of luck. He also strikes out a decent amount. So is this really a sustainable model for a player? And as we saw, he struggled. So the thought process was, okay, so maybe he just ends up becoming a platoon bat, which would be a win if you were in the Cardinals' shoes when you had him here. What will make me really question what's going on with the Cardinals is if he goes to Tampa Bay and he has success. Because, again, I really thought, okay, makes sense to trade him. The assets lost most of its value. Them selling him to get even Sean Armstrong was a bit of a win, in my opinion. If he's the one that ends up having success elsewhere, it really makes me question what they are doing inside the organization, whether it be a development standpoint or whatever it may be. Why can't they unlock the best out of these outfielders? And it's not like we're not looking at outfielders on the current big league roster and going, man, that Lars Nootbaar, he's been unbelievable this year. Wow, have you seen Jordan Walker? No, those guys are struggling as well. Why are you seeing continuously, whether it be an outfielder or it be any position player, you see the hype around them in the minor leagues. You saw it with Dylan Carlson. They get up here. They have one good season, and then it stalls. And then they have to be traded elsewhere to go have success. That is the major question that the St. Louis Cardinals need to answer because they cannot continue to be a feeder for other teams across Major League Baseball.
I always go back to what Al Avila told us. And, it's a problem when another team knows your players better than you do. And that right there is why I look at the Cardinals and say, what has gone wrong with this development? Now, I want to play this cut from Derek Gould, which I believe is on the best podcast in baseball. He did this with Kevin Wheeler most recently. And this is Derek Gould talking about why the Cardinals aren't giving their young outfielders an opportunity to succeed.
Dylan Carlson is off to a good start with Tampa Bay. I mean, he's freed of the whole thing that was going on here. And yet it just seems like the Cardinals cannot stop casting that role. It's like, for some odd reason, their default is we need to have a young outfielder who isn't going to play through struggles. Why is that the situation here? Is the pressure to win and produce so much that a young outfielder encounters this world where if you don't go 4 for 4, you don't play. If you don't go for 1 for 4 against a left-handed pitcher and you're a left-handed batter, you'll never see a left-handed pitcher again. It has been stunning to watch over the last 10 days. Dylan Carlson gets traded, as we all knew he would, as was right for him. And it's like, okay, the Cardinals now have their guys that they're going to go for. Oh, no, now Lars Nootbaar is the new Dylan Carlson. Oh, no, they need a right-handed bat, and it's Jordan Walker who's not going to play every day. What is happening?
And we've seen the emergence of Alec Burleson this season. Now, I know he's not a
permanent outfielder. More than likely, he's playing first base for you. But we have seen that guy turn into the bat that you use. But even at this point of the season, we're seeing him more against righties than you're seeing him against lefties. You're going into that platoon role. I do think Derek's on to something, and I think that's partially why Dylan Carlson has struggled here in St. Louis, was there was so much pressure to not make a mistake that when you did, you were out of the lineup. Like Colton Wong went through this with Mike Matheny. We all remember that, where you made a mistake, you're out of the lineup, and you're probably not going to see it again for a good week.
We'll see you in the next series.
Yeah, or we'll see you in the outfield, which is like, what the hell is happening right now? That is a lot of what Dylan Carlson went through, and I can understand how tough it is to perform under that when you're thinking, it's like, man, I'm going to lose my job if I mess up in this at-bat. And Derek's right. Like, Lars Nootbaar is starting to become that guy now for you. And this is why I do not want to see them do this with Jordan Walker of, hey, you can only hit against lefties. Because then in your mind, it's, cool, I'm never going to play against righties. How do I prepare to face righties when I know the manager's not going to play me against righties?
And I would push back on some of this a little bit of, I do think sometimes putting guys in platoons sets them up better. Why is Alec Burleson having major success? Well, it's because he's hitting right-handed pitching very well. If you look at his left-handed numbers, he hasn't hit lefties well. I think next year, what do you do when the season starts? You play him every day against left-handed pitching because you're trying to work on it. But once you get back to the point that we mentioned earlier, once you get to that sprint of the season, the final 50 games, now you start to play platoons. Because Ollie was right what he said last night post-game. Everyday players prove to be everyday players. Well, the Cardinals don't have those guys. Lars Nootbaar's not hitting lefties. Alec Burleson's not hitting lefties. Now, I'm not saying they should never get an opportunity to hit against lefties when we get into next season, but I understand why they're doing the platoon route. I actually think they're setting up Walker for failure by having him go against lefties, which he doesn't hit as well as right-handed pitching.
Right.
I will say this. One way that they could do this a little better, and I think this is the issue you've seen over the last handful of seasons. Well, why do they feel pressured to win? So they're going to play the guys that they think match up the best. Okay, that makes sense to me. Okay, but if you want to go the route of, okay, we want Jordan Walker to play, or let's use Burleson. You mentioned him in his splits. Burleson, not good against lefties. Actually, really bad against left-handed pitching. Okay, so if we're going to start him in the outfield, we're actively making our lineup worse by starting him against left-handed pitching. But we want to see if he can work on it, develop, and actually learn how to hit lefties.
Gorman's the other one, too.
You know how you can remain patient and not fall into the role of casting those guys too soon is if you have pitching. Because what happens then? Well, you feel more comfortable with this idea of, okay, maybe our offense isn't going to be at its peak performance today because we're actively making it a little worse by having a lefty go up against a lefty that he's not, and he struggles against left-handed pitching. So how do you do that? You have to have pitching. The problem for the Cardinals over the last handful of years is they don't have the pitching, so what do they have to do? They have to maximize the offense, which means once you get into a 3-week stretch where you look at it and go, Walker can't hit righties. Well, I guess he's going to have to be a platoon bat for us because you have to optimize the lineup because you don't have the pitching to help you buy time.
You set something up to me in the office earlier, T-Bone, where you asked in terms of developing these younger players, and you asked me, would you be okay with letting these guys go through their trials and tribulations if that meant your team was going to struggle for that amount of time? Meaning you're not going to be competitive while these players are developing.
And potentially, and the example I use, and I'll bring it to air here, is Jordan Walker early on in the year. Mm-hmm. You wanted to see Jordan Walker stay at the big leagues. And I would have been okay with that if you wanted to say he needs to work on stuff here at the big league level. I was actually okay with them sending him down. Now, imagine if the Cardinals said, well, they were in free fall, by the way, you know what, we're going to continue to play Jordan Walker. We're going to be patient. He's going to be here for the next 3 months. There's a chance he never figures it out, continues to struggle offensively, but is constantly being in the lineup. And instead of sending him down and trying to prevent what they would tell you is the snowball effect of us falling in the standings, the way they would sell it is, okay, we sent him down to try to improve the roster so we can stay in the playoff race. Are you okay with the Cardinals potentially going the opposite route of, we're going to keep Jordan Walker up here, and maybe he figures it out, and he ends up helping the big league club, or we're actively hurting our roster, and the snowball can potentially continue?
I would much rather go through that, what you just presented of let the roster go through or let the team struggle while this person develops, because I won't have the questions of what if. I won't sit there and say they screwed up Jordan Walker because you kept him in the minors or you wouldn't give him an opportunity to succeed. Somebody texted in earlier and said, guys, what other manager wouldn't be putting the best lineup on the field that they're trying to compete for the playoffs? And yes, you're correct. But I look at Arizona, And Corbin Carroll was not good at the beginning of the season. Now, I know he was incredible last year, and you're thinking just a sophomore slump. But that dude stuck in the lineup consistently, and they said, you'll figure it out. Jackson Churios from Milwaukee had a really hot month and then struggled for the next 3. And it was, we'll keep throwing them out there, though.
And what makes Milwaukee different is they were winning.
Yeah.
You know, what happens if Milwaukee's in the Cardinals' shoes? Do they send him down?
Good question to ask.
You know, what happens if San Diego, they weren't necessarily winning, but they were staying afloat.
Yeah.
If
Jackson Merrill.
If Merrill ended up struggling, would they have sent him down if they were struggling?
Again, I look at it as, would I be in the same spot right now with Jordan Walker as I would be if this team was bad for the first 2.5 months, but Jordan Walker was getting ample playing time? Team would struggle, which would suck, but I'd also be looking at this and saying, but at least we know about Jordan Walker, and now we can adjust on the fly. Now it feels like you're going into another season with the question of what if with Jordan Walker, who's supposed to be a mainstay in your outfield. He's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Graham Francis, Katie Wu, our Cardinals insider for The Athletic. She's going to join us coming up at 1 o'clock. We'll ask her some of these questions. Coming up next, we'll dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN. Terrible clock management by me. We'll get to Katie Woo at 1:05. She won't be too upset with us, but I do want to do a quick junk drawer story. Guys, I have found the worst job in the world. And no, it's not co-hosting with BK. A hunter's graveyard shift includes grabbing pythons out of the, grassy area around the graves in the Everglades. That's
fine.
That's
fine?
I'm sure you have, like, protective, a suit or
because
something.
a protective suit is going to keep you from a python.
I mean,
You're going, and this is, mind you, in the evening, you were going into a graveyard and taking pythons out of the graveyard.
why do you have to do it in the evening?
Because there's not a lot of people around, I guess. I don't know. This dude
Just say,
goes.
yeah,
Well,
why
if
do
there
you
are
have to do
pythons, there's probably not a lot of people around to begin with.
Well, I don't know
good
about
point,
it. It's
too.
a graveyard, though. So you're just saying you're cool. I got a protective gear on.
I mean, if I have a suit on that protects against, a snake bite, then fine.
I don't know if you're
But
worried
it's
about the
not-
snake bite. You're
let's
worried
say
about it.
wrapping around
and
you and constricting
strangling you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
If it was like a water moccasin, for example, one that's poisonous.
Yeah, I don't care about
that.
that.
Could make sense. This one it's not so much the bite now. It would hurt. It's more of the bite and the wraparound and the strangle, and it's all.
It's
Yeah, you
like-
couldn't. I hate snakes. You couldn't pay me
Oh,
enough
yeah, I
for
don't
that.
do snakes. But yeah, like this dude, like his job is literally going to graveyards and taking out the pythons. My question is, where do you go with them? Like, let's say I get him out of there. Where am I going with this?
You dig a grave for them. You're right there.
No, don't.
You're right there. Hey, don't go over to that tombstone over there. That's where I put all the pythons from inside the graveyard. So I have officially found the worst job in the world. Maybe that'll be a punishment. I'll have to make somebody remove snakes from an area.
No.
In our football
Just wear a
pick'em
protective
challenge.
suit.
Yeah, just put on protective suit. Apparently, we'll be all safe with that one. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Katie Woo, our Cardinals insider, coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario as we get to our celebrity line a little late. So, Katie, I will pass the tardy sauce, but she is our Cardinals insider for The Athletic. She is Katie Wu, who joins us Monday weekly here on 101 ESPN. Katie, day off for you. How are you?
I am well, guys. How are you? No BK again. I see. I'm starting to feel cheated, honestly.
Yeah, honestly, I'll send you a picture of my newborn baby girl just to make you a little happier. But we always think it's a good day when BK's not around us. But Katie, right now it's not good times around the Cardinals after dropping 2 of 3 to the LA Dodgers, falling further back in this wild card race, still within a shot of a playoff spot. But the schedule just gets more and more difficult as things move along. Being around this team, being around these players, Katie, where are things at right now, vibes-wise, for the Cardinals?
It's pretty grim in Cardinals land, guys. It's been a really disappointing week. You follow up arguably the worst series they've played with that 3-game sweep against the Reds, and you take 1 of 3 against the Dodgers, and yes, it was a much more competitive series. I mean, they lost by 1 on Friday, they lost by 1 on Sunday, but at the end of the day, they're still losses, and the Cardinals are so far beyond the point of moral victories. With 38 games to go, the only thing that matters is if they're winning or if they're losing. And so far, since the trade deadline, surprisingly, it's been a lot more losing than winning. So, look, this team knows where they are in the standings. 11 games back in the division, which is crazy. 5 games back in the National League wildcard picture. And they also know how many games remain, and they know their strength of schedule. They know that they need to go on a run. It's just a matter of if they can do so. We talked to Sonny Gray last night after the loss, and he said it just feels like the team needs to go on one of those 8-game win streaks, and then he mentioned they hadn't had one yet. So it's fair to question, is this team capable of even going on such a run when their longest winning streak was 5 games, and that was in the middle of May when they were playing their best baseball. Guys, I'm not going to write them off, but I think everyone will agree. Things have to change quickly and fast, otherwise September probably won't have much meaning for the St. Louis Cardinals team.
And, Katie, they've got multiple guys that are going through it right now offensively. And it's a conversation that is had here on the radio station. The fans talk about it. And you guys even asked Ollie Marmol about platoons yesterday during the post-game interview. How do you think the players are responding to those platoon roles right now? And do you think they almost need to be playing – they just need to set in place a lineup to kind of get things figured out here offensively?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's a multifaceted answer. So, look, no everyday player, no player in general is going to tell you that they like a platoon because every single guy wants to be in the lineup every day. What I think is interesting is the decisions that the organization is making on the players they platoon. Let's start with Alec Burleson, right? Arguably the team's best hitter in the entire first half. His numbers logically against left-handed pitchers, if you're going to look at this on which players you should platoon, he had a .516 OPS against lefties after Sunday's game for the whole season. I can understand the logic behind platooning Alec Burleson right now based on the schedule because of those numbers. At the same time, is that what's best for him? Is that what's best for his long-term development? Cardinals right now are prioritizing their very, slim chances of making the playoffs and the time crunch that they're in and trying to put together their best lineup every day. I'm not sure what good that does for Burleson because even Ollie Marmol said last night as we talked to him, it's not like Burleson's at-bats against left-handers are bad. They're still high quality of at-bats. It's the production that's off. So that one I can understand from a numbers standpoint. I might not necessarily agree, but I can understand at least that reasoning given where they are at the schedule and just how much ground they have to make up. Jordan Walker is the one, much like many of my athletic commenters, and I'm sure the text line, that's the one that does not make sense to me. All season long, the Cardinals have practiced patience, development, consistent playing time with Jordan Walker. It's why he spent 4 months in the minor leagues. He had a great 2 weeks. I don't want to take that away from him. But every single conversation we've had, whether it was with Mo or Ollie or anyone in the minor leagues, it's going to take a substantial amount of time to see changes before we entertain calling him back up. Jordan Walker himself thought that he maybe wouldn't make it back to the major leagues this year and was focusing on 2025. Now, injuries change things, and Walker did have a good 2 weeks, but I don't understand the point of bringing Walker up just to sit him and platoon him against left-handed bats, especially when most of the time he's pretty reverse splitty. That's one that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, we're not going to see Walker start probably these next 3 games against the Brewers because the Brewers are throwing out 3 consecutive right-handers. That also means we probably won't see Tommy Pham. That's another one that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Tommy Pham, you traded for him. There was a reason you held up the Eric Fetty trade. He's not in there every day. And in my opinion, in the small sample size we saw for the 2 weeks Before they started this extreme platoon, he had some of the most consistent at-bats regardless of handedness. I'm sure Tommy Pham, who came to the Cardinals hoping to contend for a playoff team, was a highly coveted trade target, also doesn't appreciate sitting on the bench half the time. But this is the hole the Cardinals have dug themselves into. You heard Ollie Marmol say it yesterday. They're trying to put together the best shot they have each day, so it's going to be a rotating lineup. You can argue for it. I'm willing to listen to those arguments, but that's where they stand right now.
And, Katie, you had mentioned with Alec Burleson, is it best for him in terms of the long run for 2025 and beyond to not be getting at-bats against lefties? And I want to use that as kind of the backdrop for this question of, are they at the point now where they are playing for 2025? And is there a split between how the front office views that and how Ollie Marmol views it? Because Mo said on the Cardinals radio network over the weekend, if Walker is here, he needs to be playing every day.
Correct. And as we see, Walker is not playing every day. I have to dive into that one, you guys, because it just doesn't make sense. And I think out of all of the things, I don't think the team is playing for 2025 yet. That's why you're seeing such the extreme platoon. To me, this is we have one last chance to make a run and be relevant in September. So the coaching staff, because as we know, Ollie Marmol and bench coach Daniel Descalso, they make the lineup every day. Mo doesn't really have a say in that day-to-day part of their operations. So I think what this coaching staff is trying to do is maximize their best possible chance of production based on what the numbers say, because the situation is so dire here. I mean, look, we said it, 11 games back in the division, all of a sudden 5 games out of a very complicated wild card picture. Nothing is guaranteed. There are only 38 games remaining. I don't think they're playing for 2025. I think they're playing for their very last chance in 2024. Whether or not it's the right move remains to be seen, but it definitely is so. What strikes me about it is that it's just such a far removal from what this organization has preached all year long. At the same time, this offense has been flat since April, and they're maybe trying to jolt it in the best way they can based on the numbers. All around, though, guys, I think the writing is on the wall. This next week, probably the most important week of the season for the Cardinals, because if they have another week like they did their last week, I'm just not sure how they can push the picture that they're a playoff team.
So, Katie, that's kind of my next question, and that's the question I've been battling with, honestly, for the last 3 or 4 years. Are the Cardinals best suited to try and get to the playoffs again, or does it feel like this team might be better suited to focus on the next year at this point? I know it seems so odd to say because, of course, you want playoff baseball, but it just seems like this team is always stuck in the middle and never willing to commit to one side or the other.
I think that's definitely something you can say in 21 and 22. That was a different year because, you had such standout seasons from Goldschmidt, Pujols, Arenado. 23, also kind of an anomaly for me. And then 24, I think you're kind of seeing the overlying theme of the Cardinals, basically going back to 2018. So it's difficult for me to say what they should do right now because you never want to pivot on a season, especially when you went in at the deadline and you were a buyer. And I'm sure as an organization, you want your fan base to have a winning product. That's why I think you're seeing, again, this platoon, this kind of last possible thing they could do to try to generate some sort of power or momentum. But, I think when you're looking at August, 3 games against Milwaukee, 3 games against the Twins, and then a big 4-game set at home against Mike Schilt and the Padres, that to me, August 29th, rather, the last Thursday of the month, the last game against the Padres, that to me is kind of let's reevaluate. Is it still necessary? Is it going to be necessary to pivot to 25? Is the writing on the wall here, or can they make a run over the next week and a half to maybe change their mind? It's kind of all up in the air. We're used to August kind of being a lay low, dog days kind of month, but I think the Cardinals are playing all the pressure. There are a bunch of smart guys in there that have played a lot of baseball, a lot of postseason experience, and they know it's pretty much now or never going forward.
Katie, I'm sure you saw yesterday, Dylan Carlson had another good performance for the Tampa Bay Rays in a walk-off hit. He's been playing well with the Tampa Bay Rays since being traded. What do you think it will say about the St. Louis Cardinals if we see another outfielder leave the organization and have success elsewhere?
I'm not surprised that Dylan Carlson is having success in Tampa Bay. I think that was always kind of going to be no matter where he went. The end result, but it was also clear that he was not going to see that type of success in St. Louis. I'm not sure if you can say that with all of the outfielders over the last 5 years, but you're looking at similarities between Tyler O'Neill and Dylan Carlson. I absolutely see that where people can make the correlation. I think the Cardinals have a bigger problem, and this is maybe something that you're looking in the offseason of just, are they able to get the best out of their young, developing players, right? Carlson, former top prospect, finished 3rd on Rookie of the Year voting in 2021. and then hit a slide. And injuries didn't help, but by 24, he was a shell of the player he used to be in St. Louis. And it was necessary for both parties to find a new home for him. It was the best thing for Carlson. It was the best thing for the Cardinals. Both can exist. What I would hate to see is Lars Nootbaar or Jordan Walker falling in that same narrative. So I think the Carlson one is a little bit kind of on the outside picture for me, just because it was necessary and clear for both parties that it was time for his tenure in St. Louis to come to an end. I think if you're the Cardinals, you're looking at your current group of guys. You're looking at Burleson. You're looking at Lars, who has not had a good season. You're looking at Walker, where things have gone so sideways in his short tenure in the major leagues. And you're thinking, how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again with our talented outfielders? And maybe that's a focus over the offseason so that it doesn't happen again.
Katie, final one for me, and I want to go to the pitching side because Andre Pallante had another really good start over the weekend against the Dodgers, going 7 innings and giving up 2 runs. And I know Steven Matz is making his way back. Lance Lynn is making his way back. Does it make the most sense for this team to keep Andre Pallante in the rotation down the stretch because he's going to be in it next year?
Oh, yes, he's earned it. When you're thinking about the players since really the All-Star break, the pitchers that you feel the most confident when they take the mound, Andre Pallante for me is number one, and that says a lot both about him and the rotation in general. I think, it's easy for an organization to play it day by day and not make those decisions yet on what they're going to do if Matz comes back from the injured list or when Lance Lynn comes back from the injured list and so on. And I floated the idea of a 6-man rotation to Ollie yesterday, and he said, we're not there yet because these things happen to usually work themselves out, and usually they do. But when Matz, who is slated for one more rehab assignment this week, is activated off the injured list, it will presumably be as a starting pitcher. I can see the Cardinals maybe pivoting to a 6-man rotation. This is just my speculation because we've heard how tired these guys are, right? They're gassed. Sonny Gray is running on fumes. Kyle Gibson on fumes. Miles Nicholas on fumes. And we've seen that in their latest performances. They've dropped, right? They're not the same pitchers they were in the first half. Pallante, to his credit, has really figured it out, and I can't see the organization justifying taking him out of it because he's done everything they've asked him to do and more. Again, these things usually work themselves out before they get to that decision, but if all 5 pitchers are still healthy and Steven Matz is activated off the injured list, I do wonder if the Cardinals could implement a 6-man rotation going forward.
Katie, you're always the best. Enjoy the off day, and we will talk to you next week. Again, people can follow Katie on Twitter at KatieJWoo, and, of course, all of her great work over at The Athletic. Katie, thank you so much.
You got it, guys. Talk soon.
There you go. Katie Woo getting amped up for the Milwaukee Brewers series. And I want to carry over that answer to our next segment of Andre Pallante because I do find the 6-man rotation item interesting, but I also don't know if that's what's best for the Cardinals if you're talking about trying to win now. So we'll discuss that coming up next year on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friends over at Rhino Shield, updating the exterior of your home. Here's the thing. You might just think you can paint it yourself, and I want to emphasize that word paint. You can go out and buy the paint. You could do it yourself, but what Rhino Shield uses isn't paint. Paint deteriorates over time. Water makes it chip away. Sun, the UV rays, makes it chip away, and you're going to be painting it over and over and over. What Rhino Shield uses is a ceramic coating. It's a 2 to 3 coating process that sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than any paint you're going to get. Plus, it's 100% waterproof. It deflects 90% of the UV rays. We painted our home with Rhino Shield back in 2020, and our house looks brand new, just like it did the day that Darren and his team did their work. It's also backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. You basically set it and forget it with Rhino Shield. They've been featured on HGTV's show multiple times. Everything you need is with Rhino Shield. So give Darren a call today. He'll come out and give you a free estimate. He'll even tell you what he believes would work best for the home. He did that with us, and we love the exterior color that he picked. 877-25-RHINO. Call him today. Tell him Alex Ferrario sent you, or check him out online at 877-25rhino.com.
I love having him in the rotation right now. He's done a nice job of giving us a shot every time out, going deep in games. Right now, it doesn't matter righty lefty. He's killing it.
If I just gave you this stat line against the Dodgers, 7 innings, 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts. What pitcher do you think I was describing against the Dodgers?
I'd go, man, that Sonny Gray was awesome.
100%. I would have been, damn, Sonny Gray was great. Or I'd say, wow, what a start by Kyle Gibson. If you would have said that.
Oh, no.
Well, come on, man. Gibby could go 7 innings with 2 earned runs. Maybe the strikeout number's not as high, but hey, he could do it. If you would have told me at the beginning of the season that stat line was Andre Pallante against the Dodgers, I would have told you were crazy. But that's just that. And look, it's not just against the Dodgers. If you look at what Andre Pallante has done, and Katie Wu set it up basically saying what he has done since the All-Star break. Since the All-Star break, 6 total starts. He's got a 4.1 ERA, but a 3.5 FIP. He's also gone a total of 34 and 34 and 2/3 innings with 24 strikeouts and has given up only 2 home runs and 12 walks. Everything that I just read about Andre Pallante has screamed, this guy is a starter for you, not just for the rest of the season, but for the future. And he's a cost-efficient pitcher, which I think is so important considering how much money you spent on Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson to provide you innings and to provide you quality innings this offseason. But what Katie Wu said about the 6-man rotation, kind of that might be the path that the Cardinals are going to pursue. I'm glad we're not discussing Andre Pallante going back to Memphis for the remainder of the season, because if you're going to lie to people and say that we're fighting for a playoff spot, well, then you can't do that action of sending Andre Pallante down. But, man, it's to the point where I look at this and say, I don't even think they need a 6-man rotation. Like, over the weekend, what you did was you stayed at least competitive with the LA Dodgers with your pitching. I know Sonny Gray didn't get the win, but that was a hell of a performance yesterday by Sonny Gray to keep things close for a team that had no offense. Going to a 6-man rotation means you're putting Lance Lynn back into this rotation, or you're putting Steven Matz into this rotation. And to me, I don't think that provides this team their best chance to win. It's more so keeping Pallante in the rotation and moving one of these guys into your bullpen.
Yeah, I've been really impressed from what we've seen from Andre Pallante, and he is a guy that whether you're pushing for the playoffs or you're just playing for 2025, Pallante should be starting for the St. Louis Cardinals. Gives you your best chance to win, and again, he's a young guy that you want to see try and develop at the big leagues. If you get to the point where it is okay, we're playing for the 2025 season, I think the idea of going to a 6-man rotation, I get it to an extent. I don't necessarily mind it when you get to September potentially and you get that extra roster or 2 extra roster spots so you can throw an extra bullpen arm in there. Because the one thing that never really makes sense about a 6-man rotation to me is, okay, well, that means I got to pull a bullpen arm out. So instead of having, the 7 or 8 bullpen weapons that you really trust, well, now one of those guys is gone. And now you've got another starter in here. And you kind of limit the amount of time between the starts for your number 1. So now, granted, they've tried to do that with Sonny Gray this season. They prefer to have him on a 5-day off schedule compared to 4 and then make that start. So it's interesting. We'll see what they end up doing. I would just put Matz and Lynn in the bullpen.
I would too.
And that's not to say Miles Michaelis must keep his job. He just doesn't have a role in the bullpen.
Yeah, I was going to say Lynn and Matz have more of a role in a use out of the bullpen than Michaelis.
They've got swing and miss. There's lanes for them. Lance Lynn is very good against right-handed batters this season. And Steven Matz, even though it's been a smaller sample size, has been better against lefties than righties. Righties look like Babe Ruth against him. So there's a lane for those guys in the bullpen. That's why, to me, Andre Pallante, he's staying in that rotation, and it's twofold. It is whether this team is actually out of it and they say, you know what, it's time to wave the white flag. It's time to let the kids play for the final, month and a half of this season. Okay, well, Pallante then should be in the rotation because I can't tell you how big of a deal it is to have a cost control starter at Andre Pallante who will hit arbitration for the first time this upcoming offseason, and he's got 4 ARB years, and he's not a free agent until 2028. That is cost control to where you don't have to go and pay Lance Lynn.
I was going to say, you're saving $11 million in that front.
Exactly. And then that money can be allocated for, maybe it's a bullpen arm, maybe it's a outfielder or a platoon bat or a guy that can come off the bench for you that can play first base. Let's use Josh Bell, for example. If they say, you know what, Alec Burleson's our first baseman, we still would feel better if we had a backup / a platoon bat for him. Maybe we can go get Josh Bell for $10 million bucks this offseason. Like, that's how much it really helps to have that. I'm not saying he's going to be an ace, because that would really be a steal. But if you get a guy that's like a number 3 through 5, that's cost controlled, that's a solid guy that you can trust every day that he takes them out, doesn't necessarily have to eat innings, but you go, you know what, Pallante's going to give us 5 solid innings in his start tonight at the bare minimum. That's a win for the St. Louis Cardinals, and it's the thing that they've really been lacking for the last handful of years. It's why they've been constantly churning through, whether you want to call it starting pitchers, or it is they've been having to go to the free agent market, or they've had to go to the trade market at the deadline to go and make sure that they can solidify their rotation.
So we had this question earlier in the show we just didn't get to, but now that you're starting to see this and we're towards the end of the season, are we able to say that the Cardinals pitching plan this offseason worked, even if they missed the playoffs? Because for me, I absolutely can say it worked. Like, your pitching has been better than last year, but, I mean, again, not a high bar to clear. But you got swing and miss stuff. I think you saw the best of certain guys, like the ones that you brought in terms of Kyle Gibson and Sonny Gray. Those guys have been the success for you, although I know Sonny Gray you could make the argument with. And then you find Andre Pallante. The guys that haven't worked out are the one that was already here in Miles Mikolas and Steven Matz and Lance Lynn, which was kind of that was a shot in the dark no matter what when you brought him in. And then your bullpen, of course, it's broken down by now, but in the first 2-3 months of the season, it's kept you close. Would you say that it's worked?
I think I would say yes. I don't feel great about it saying that, but I think I would say yes, because I go back. Now, granted, I think it was a flawed philosophy to build the rotation this way, but I understand what they were trying to do. The pitching was supposed to kind of keep them afloat, and the offense was what's supposed to get them over the top. So in that aspect, I would say, okay, it's kind of worked, to where they haven't had to call up a bunch of young guys. For the most part, you've had these guys post every single day. But, you know, it's nothing to write home about. What really failed them this season was the offense. The offense is what failed them. Their pitching's been fine.
Yeah, if your offense was a little over league average, we'd be talking about a playoff team.
I think, would I say that this team built the rotation, that their offseason plan was a success? I would say it was okay. I would say like 6 out of 10. You know, you did a good job. These guys posted. You didn't have to rush anybody through the minor leagues like Quinn Matthews or Tinkins. So I guess I would have to say yes, it's kind of been a success, but it's not an overwhelming success, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, and that's where I am too. I think if we were talking about an offense that was more consistent and had more better slug, we'd be talking about a for sure playoff team, but instead we're talking about this because even when your pitchers are out there performing well, your offense doesn't back it up. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. No answer yet on the Edmonton Oilers matching of the offer sheet, but one thing I did want to mention is Doug Armstrong, he is clearly targeting the area of weakness for this Blues team moving forward. What does that mean for the acceleration of the retool, and how important is what he's doing make for Alexander Steen's future? We'll get to that next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about Classic Air Care and your HVAC system needs. Look, if you don't have a company that's taking care of your HVAC system year-round, then you are missing out and potentially putting your old HVAC system at risk of busting out for you, whether it's in the summer heat or in the freezing cold temperatures in the wintertime. That's why I'm urging you to call Classic Air Care and be a part of their maintenance agreement. And I've been a part of this since 2016. My parents have been a part of the maintenance agreement spent, honestly, for the past 50 years working with Classic Air Care. And what this is twice a year, Classic Air Care comes out before you flip your HVAC system on, before you flip your heater on. They check it out. They fine tune it. They clean it. They make sure that it's good to go for the upcoming season. And if you have any issues in between those services, you give them a call. You get priority of them coming out, fixing whatever issues you might have. It's all a part of that maintenance agreement, and they've got different levels of it that you can be a part of, from standard to elite, and there's so many more perks that go into it. There are over 14,000 of these going on in the city with Classic Air Care, and you could check out the incredible reviews that they have up on Google Reviews, a 4.8 rating with over 4,000 positive reviews talking about the customer service at Classic Air Care. Give them a call today or check them out online. Tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. It's Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Another tough weekend for the Cardinals. They dropped 2 of 3 in the series against the Dodgers. They lost 7-6 on Friday and 2-1 yesterday. They eked out a win 5-2 on Saturday to win one game in that series. They now fall to 61-63, 2 games below 500 as they try to continue to push for the playoffs. 5 games behind Atlanta for that final wild card spot and 11 back back of Milwaukee for the division lead, and they'll look to cut into that 11 games back for the Brewers as the Brewers are in town starting tomorrow for a 3-game set against the Cardinals at Busch Stadium. I'm Grant Francis. The Sports Center update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
So Doug Armstrong has identified the need for the Blues, and it's not a need that surprises any of us. It's been a need, frankly, for the last 4 years we've been talking about finding a left-handed defenseman who can play in your top 4, potentially with Colton Parayko. And that goes all the way back to when they traded for Nick Leddy, felt like it was it, and then they've still been searching for it. But I think the one thing that's important with this looming decision about Philip Broberg, and do they get Philip Broberg from Edmonton, or do the Oilers match it, and the Blues are back to having Scott Perunovich, Torrey Krug, Pierre-Olivier Joseph, all a part of that other defenseman that gets the starting opportunity? This is the direction that Doug Armstrong is pointed now, because it's not just this year, and I completely forgot about this until Grant brought it up earlier today. This is the second straight year that Doug has nearly acquired a top 4 defenseman that would be playing for this team, potentially with Colton Parayko. Now, last year they missed out because Torrey Krug invoked his no-trade clause, which he's allowed to do. And this year, you're trying to do something with an offer sheet and forcing a team to make a decision and match the offer of this player. It's not an easy task because you're basically put in a position to where, well, we're hoping in this. We're hoping this player approves the trade. We're hoping this team doesn't acquire and say, nope, we'll match this offer. But that's the job that Doug Armstrong is trying to accomplish right now. It's an uphill battle, yes, but he is clearly targeting that upgrade on the left side for this defensive core, not just now, but for the future. And if you've ever had optimism about this Blues team, it's sooner or later you have to imagine Doug is going to strike it with one of these options. It's just right now you're stuck in a spot where you can't really do much.
Yeah, I love the aggressive nature from Doug Armstrong in saying, okay, what are the things that we don't necessarily have in this retool? And one of them is, okay, we don't have a top pairing defenseman that we can pair with Colton Parayko in the long run. You know, This year you've got Nick Leddy, who played really well with him last year. So, okay, that's the short answer. And he's under a contract this year, and I believe next year's his last year, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. So Doug Armstrong's looking at this going, okay, do we have somebody that we think really pairs well with Colton Parayko? And that's not saying like, oh, they don't believe in Theo Lindstein then in their minor league system. No, they probably like Theo Lindstein. They probably think he's a top 4 defenseman, but they want a guy with size that's going to play with Colton Parayko. And I love the fact that they're able to look at this and say, okay, we don't have that internally, and we're not going to just like wait around and see if we draft that guy in the next handful of years. We're not going to wait around and see if someone becomes available on free agency. They're trying to pounce on it, even though this move is thinking more of like, okay, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, not so much for impacting the here and now. And that's not to say like if they got Broberg and this offer sheet goes through, he's not going to necessarily not help them now. He will, but this is more of a play for, okay, when we're back in our cup window, are we going to have that number 1 defenseman that can compare, or at least that guy that can play with Colton Parayko? And that's why he targeted Travis Sanheim last year. It's why he wanted to try and get that trade done with the Philadelphia Flyers. It's why he's offer sheeted Broberg again. And I think the 2 spots that the St. Louis Blues are really looking at as, okay, these are the 2 that we have to figure out in the near term, in the short term, for the long run, which is that left-handed defenseman that would play with Colton Parayko. And I've said it on this show, and I continue to say it. I believe when they find that guy, they'll be able to get out of the retool. Maybe not in like the year they do it. Like I'm not saying if Broberg signs, I'm going, come contender!
Whoa!
But I will say like, okay, now I feel more confident of them exiting this retool in a year or 2. I think the other one they're looking at is the second line center. And that's where it is. They really want to see Dvorsky come in and try and win the job. I think their hope is he wins that job this year. He plays, and they can figure out, okay, what do we have in him? But worst case scenario, they'll still believe that, okay, maybe it's not this year, but next year he can take that role. Those are the two spots that I look at right now and say, okay, they're trying to figure out, do they have the center internally? They know they don't have the defenseman, and it's why you're seeing Doug Armstrong be so aggressive the last 2 off seasons to try and go get that guy.
Well, and we've gotten a lot of texts asking, like, if they don't get Broberg, what's the pivot? And frankly, the best answer is I don't know what the pivot is. Like, the pivot always shows
it's next offseason.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of RFAs next offseason. Grant and I were already looking at the contract situation of the Rangers next year. They can't afford Keandre Miller.
Pause. That doesn't sound like the guy that I heard at 11:15 that said,
I
believe they're going to get Broberg.
It's happening.
Ferrario's out here like, all right, I guess I got to look at and see what they're going to get next year on the RFA market.
Well, this was also before I got really sad, and Jason Greger made me happier. But I'm answering the question that people keep asking of what's the pivot. I don't think there's going to need to be a pivot, but RFAs are always around, and the Blues are going to have more cap space to use if another team gets into a bad situation. But the other thing is, like, look at Mikhail Sergachev. Like, Mikhail Sergachev, I think we all would agree, is a top-pairing defenseman. He's left side. He's 26 years old. He just got traded at the draft because a team couldn't afford him. What it does for you is it does present more opportunities to make moves, and you already know that this team is going to be looking at those left-handed defensemen. The other thing I was thinking of is what Doug Armstrong is doing right now really benefits a guy like Alexander Steen as the general manager in 2 years. Like, I kind of comp this to what Doug Armstrong took over when he took over for the St. Louis Blues, and he worked hand in hand with Larry Plow for a couple of years, and then when Plow retired, Doug Armstrong took over. Think about this. He is addressing every need that the Blues team needs prior to Steen taking over, so that they don't have to worry about draft pick compensation. They don't have to worry about drafting in the top 10. You don't have to worry about a left-handed defenseman. You don't have to worry about forwards that are young in your system. It all comes back to the skeleton is in place for Alexander Steen. You've got your core pieces in place by the year you take over as GM, and now you just need to add to it. And I think that's the best way to set somebody up for success when in terms of being a general manager, rather than Steen taking over in 2 years and saying, you don't have a number one left-handed defenseman. You don't really have the top players in your minor league system that can take over, so you're going to kind of continue to cycle through this retool.
Yeah, I think it's possible if this deal does go through for Broberg, you potentially have the two needs that I mentioned covered. You got Broberg, the left-handed defenseman, and you have potentially Dvorsky if he pans out. Now you're looking at that roster, and if you're Alexander Steen, to your point, yeah, now I've got that core that's in place. Now maybe top line winger's another one that they may have to look at, because I think Kairu's probably at this point, I don't know if you guys disagree with this, I think at this point he's probably best suited on a contending team as the second line winger. So maybe
that's best case scenario.
Maybe that's
here.
The one thing that Alexander Steen would still have to look for, or hell, Doug Armstrong's still looking for in the 2 years before he takes over. But I do think it is better if Doug Armstrong can get these guys in place, to your point, because you now look at them and you go, okay, I see what the core is, and now it's Steen's job just to kind of add supplementary pieces to it. Unlike you look at the Cardinals across the street and you look at them and you go, okay, if let's say Mo left at the end of this year, things continue to go south, Mo ends up leaving, whoever takes over as the next president of baseball operations is going to be looking at this roster going, who the hell's our core? Because it's not Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. Paul Goldschmidt doesn't have a contract for next year. I don't necessarily know if it is Nolan Arenado anymore after he continues to trend the wrong direction. There's all kinds of questions that the new Pobo would have to figure out. Meanwhile, if you're Steen, you're set up for better success the moment you take over, which one puts you in better graces with the fans if you have success early on, to just take this team over, look at it and say, okay, now we got to go find the complementary pieces. Now, these deals have to go through for us to really be sitting in that spot potentially at this time tomorrow to be saying that. But it is setting up to be a better position for Alexander Steen to take over as the GM in 2 years, compared to the way I look at the Cardinals right now and go, I don't know who the next Bobo is, and I don't know what the hell he's going to be working with.
What I will say, though, when you talk about the pivot, and this is why I think people have a lot of trust in Doug Armstrong and they like the way he operates, is that regardless, if this does not go through and the Blues don't acquire Philip Broberg,
it will.
Right. If. Very hypothetical situation here. they've gone the route of trying to get a player to waive a no-trade clause and bring in a player through trade. They've gone the route of trying to offer sheet a player. Like, we're at the point where this team is trying to do everything they can to improve their area of weakness. And you can't really say that you compare them to the Cardinals. Like, they're doing what they can to improve the area of weakness. The Cardinals just keep on trying to run it back, and that's where it gets frustrating. But you can see with Doug Armstrong and the way the Blues operate, they are going to do everything in their power. We might not know the specific pivot of what that could be, but you know there will be a pivot at some point, and they're going to exercise every option possible to improve this team.
Yeah, those players always present themselves because every team gets into a bad cap situation. Every player wants to be paid more, and if a team can't afford it, another team with cap space flexibility jumps in and finds that player available to them. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Again, that match, the offer sheet announcement from Edmonton, their decision, the deadline is 8:30 St. Louis time tomorrow morning, so they have until 8:30 a.m. St. Louis time to make a decision on matching one, both, or neither of those players from Edmonton. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll rewind it as we wrap up BK and Ferrario next on 101 ESPN. Closing it down here on BK and Ferrario as we hit today's Rewind with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. If you missed anything from the show today, you can check it out on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com, or wherever you get your podcasts from, always presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. We talked with Katie Wu, our Cardinals insider of The Athletic. I also gave you optimism of why Broberg and Holloway are going to be Blues after this offer deadline. So make sure you listen to that and get the optimism before we get potentially bad news. But nope. Don't think of it that way. It's going to be positive news. But we also, T-Bone, and we'll rewind it with this, talked about the Cardinals' disconnect with the front office and the coaching staff. And a lot of this is riding on the usage of Jordan Walker and hearing John Mozeliak's comments about where the Cardinals are at and how playing time is dire for guys like Jordan Walker. But they also have to look at the schedule. You see Ollie, who views this as he's best against lefties, and that's where he's going to play. This is the biggest concern for a team that might miss the playoffs for the second consecutive year, might finish with less than 80 wins for the second consecutive year. And when you look at personnel and usage of these younger players, sure, we've seen development of Mason Wynn. Sure, we've seen it of Alec Burleson. But guys like Jordan Walker are critical for this team's development in the future. And if they're still at a crossroads, 10 years after we talked about this with Mike Matheny and John Mozeliak, I'm concerned about what the future looks like until Mo's gone.
Yeah, it's very disappointing to hear this kind of disconnect between the front office, who wants Walker up here and wants him to play every day, yet their manager is not going to play him every day because he doesn't think it helps them get to the playoffs, which is his job right now. This is the third manager that this has happened under with Mo. You mentioned Matheny, happened with Schilt, now happening with Ollie Marmol. This cannot happen. There cannot be this disconnect between the Cardinals front office and the management staff that is on the field. This is the kind of things that you see from organizations that are poor-run organizations. The organizations that are doing things the right way have the communication line from the manager to the front office to ownership. And right now, you can say that the St. Louis Cardinals do not have that, which is very disappointing, which, to your point, makes me very much worried about what the future holds for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Off tonight, back in action tomorrow as they start a 3-game series against the Milwaukee Brewers. And again, Katie, who was with us earlier today, talked about how it might be the evaluating after that San Diego Padres series of what to do for the rest of the season, whether continue to push for the postseason or play for 2025. So a big series starts up tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow. BK will be with us starting at 11 a.m. until 2 o'clock. Huge shout out to Grant Francis for helping us out today as well. For Grant, for T-Bone, I'm Alex. Don't forget, we've got the 101 ESPN second annual Blues and Brews Friday, September 20th out at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. You can get fired up for the blues season at the Outdoor Street Party. It features live music from country music star Matt Stell and St. Louis's own Charles Glenn, plus appearances by Blues player, alumni, food trucks, 101 giveaways, and so much more. Tickets just $20 and are on sale now. You can check out more at 101ESPN.com. We'll see you tomorrow, 11 to 2. Fastlane coming up next here on 101 ESPN.